Previously on Baseball Breakfast. Hit the like, support the channel, you freeloading chat rats. Ben says he saw his buddy do the Dallas double tap. Yeah, no shit. Sacrilegious makes it his life mission to squeak out every piece of EV.
Well, I don't think you want him very much because you're talking him up right before we pick.
You get on here every Monday and you do 4 drafts.
Kind of a make-a-wish for him. He keeps DMing me, can I come on Baseball Breakfast?
Guy almost dying on the field. Like, you're going to need some insane luck, too. You can't tell it's him, right? All you see is cock.
Literally 12 fucking red badges.
They pay you $10 to review their team. We're charging $39. Have we heard from the best ball brunch guy yet?
That was last week on Best Ball Breakfast. Today on Best Ball Breakfast, 4 more Best Ball Mania 5 drafts. Drafts number 68, draft number 69 with Shawn, Siegele, draft number 70 with Pat Kerrane, and draft number 71 with our special guest today, Chris Spags from Splash Play, and probably going to be a great show. Let's roll. My slow draft rooms are so much different than my streamed drafts.
Does no one realize Underdog's half-point PPR? Idiots!
Damn, bro. You know ball. Hope you guys packed your bags. I packed my bags. No, I mean, I literally packed my bags.
Dude, Star Method's legit. Only way to max out every contest in a plus EV way.
Week 17, you still gotta get there, bro.
We have a finite sample. We only have so much samples. Is it negative EV to stream all your drafts? We just don't know. All right, GMs all around. How are we doing? Hope everyone had a good 4th of July weekend. I was mentioning on Best Ball After Dark on Saturday night that I feel like my entire schedule has been out of whack this past month between some travel, between 4th of July. We had some childcare hiccups around here. I'm ready to get in the groove again. It feels like we are in the fast lane to the start of the season. Going to be a big couple of months around here, around the Deposit Kingdom channel, around FantasyLife as well. We got some big things dropping today. I believe some of those announcements are being made right this minute. Launching a premium product, the FantasyLife Plus product is out, and we also have a new facelift on the newsletter. And of course, excited to dive into all things best ball here today. Checking in on how you guys are doing. What is up, Katie? What is up, Nick? Back to work today after paternity leave. Oh, man, I feel you on that one. That does not sound fun. Well, hopefully we can get you through with some best ball shenanigans. Yes, we did get stood up. I had booked Hit 'em with the Gritty for Best Ball After Dark on Saturday night. He ghosted me. He did later send me a message that he had a family emergency come up. It would have been nice if he sent me a heads up, just, 3 words, 4 words. Hey, I can't make the show, instead of leaving us at the altar. But I will say we had a fun solo After Dark stream on Saturday night. That is, of course, available to all of you YouTube members. If you're in the Best Ball Value Hounds tier, I do those shows weekly, bring on guests from around the industry. We'll see if I can get synced up again with Gritty, although I'm feeling burned. I don't like getting stood up after promoting it. So we shall see. I know I was thinking about this too. I randomly realized draft 69. It's not even a solo stream. It's not with Pat. It's not with Spags. It's with Shawn, Siegele, the most professional man who will be on this stream today. And he, of course, is the one who is getting draft number 69. What is up, Tom? Let's see here. So intro forces auto explicit rating for the audio listeners. Get it out of the way. Yeah. When I upload this to, I use the Anchor Spotify platform to host the podcast version of this, which you guys can always access if you're not able to, watch a 4-hour YouTube stream. I do post these to the In a Vacuum podcast feed. Sometimes will start to think through, did I say anything explicit? And then I'm like, I probably did. And I just click the explicit tag. I know many people are listening to this show, with their children in the car, and they need to know if it's kosher or not. What is up, JJFC? Bill Sickles. Are you new around here, Bill? I don't know if I recognize you. I like that name. I like the cut of your jib there, Bill Sickles. Yes, got hit by the Gritty, hit him with the ghosting. Guys, I'm sorry. I do my Best Ball Mania drafts. I do almost exclusively on stream. I do 4 here on Mondays. I do 1 on the Swolecast. I try to primarily do them on stream. I'm not trying to gamify it to get to 69 perfectly
with a specific guest. I apologize for that. So rare miss by me. We will see if we can get Shawn to acknowledge that he is part of Draft 69, though. We will see if we can do that. Bill Sickle saying he's mostly a lurker, but hang here every Monday. We should have an all lurker day. Like, if you're one of those people that are, watching but never commenting, everyone come out of the woodwork. That's how I sometimes feel with the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel, because I recognize the majority of you in the chat here. A lot of you guys are YouTube members. I recognize your usernames, interact with you guys. But then I'll get some of these comments on the Deposit Kingdom channel because those videos will find like a wider best ball audience. I was like, I have never seen this name in my life, and you're coming in here pretty hot. So it is always nice to meet new people. It is wild to see how much best ball is growing in the interest. I notice it over on that Deposit Kingdom channel. I notice it when I do stuff for FantasyLife. Lots of people who were best ball casual or best ball curious are now very much starting to dip their toes into these waters. It's great to see. It is great to see. And speaking of the Deposit Kingdom channel, I had a video out last week looking at discounted players, whether for suspension risk, i.e. Rashee Rice, or because of injury concerns. Guys potentially starting the season on PUP, guys who might not be ready for the majority of the season, the TJ Hawkinsons, the Nick Chubbs, and then kind of going through each of those on a case-by-case basis. So I highly recommend checking out that video. That's over on the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel. Thank you to David and Michael Dubner from RotoViz for helping me research that. I think that came out really well and came away with kind of two screaming targets for drafts right now. Speaking of drafts, I hopped in a Best Ball Mania, and I will say this. Normally these snap fill, I tipped people off in the Discord, and there's still spots in here. So if you have ever been complaining about not being able to get into a stream draft, now is your chance. There's now down to one spot left, but I've been vamping for the past 2 minutes to fill a Best Ball Mania draft. It did just fill here, so no excuses if you didn't get in this one. This one was telegraphed from a mile away. I have a feeling this will be a friends and family draft here. Let's see. I hopped in. I'm at the 110. We, of course, got my guy, TM Longacre. I see NP in here, Gambit, Mark, of course, Zach Lanners, of course. All right, so we got some friends. Was it everyone's saving their bullets for the pit bull right now, right? All right, we're smoking out the lurkers. Here we go. Here's the lurkers. Scottish lurker, elite onesie protagonist here. I love it. Usually stream at work, so just lurking to keep the boss away. Lurker bros in the chat. The Lurker Show is what this will be known as. Draft number 68 with the Lurkers. Oh, I know you, Josh. David's a newbie subscriber. Did I mess up picking Pittman Jr. over Diggs and BPM 5? I think so. I think you messed up. But you know what, David? Get back at him. There's always another draft. Michael Pittman's been a tough click for me. Even using kind of my aggregated ranks, I don't end up getting him a lot. I really like Downs. I'm really warming up to AD Mitchell as well. So yeah, I'm just not clicking Pittman a ton, playing it through some of those cheaper pieces. We got more lurkers. Sauceton, Ross. I recognize you, Ross. No, I know you, Rohan. Black Muddy River 89. I think you are Lurk McKirky PPR scam. Cole Lurkin. Peter Lurk. I recognize you, Peter. Yeah, let's be nice to David. He came in here. He admitted to us that he took Michael Pittman over Stephon Diggs. If this lurker draft wins BBM, do we also get shoes as well? No, you get a hooded cloak, a balaclava. What is something a lurker would wear? A dark set of sunglasses. Lurker plus. Nick's always lurking. Good morning, Al. Mr. Yeah, right. You're not a lurker. You're a draft stalker. Mr. is TM Longacre for people, by the way. All right, I'm on the clock. I need to feel out this room here. On Best Ball After Dark, I took Breece Hall with my first pick. I'm going to take Garrett Wilson here. Feel out this room. See how avalanche-y we're feeling. I like this. CW says, I'm going to do a BBM draft right now so I can get that same feeling you get when you eat food and watch a cooking show at the same time. I like that. Can I be the Martha Stewart of best ball? Or am I more like the Paula Dean? More butter. Can you keep your lurker status if you're commenting in the lurker draft? I think I'll allow it. I will allow it. All right, I'm back on the clock here. I've been kind of mixing up my starts with Garrett Wilson. Let's do a Garrett Wilson and Debo. Brandon Ayuk already off the board at 12-13. I've kind of talked about this whenever I've been getting these later slots, that I don't want all of my Garrett Wilson just paired with, I'd say my most frequented pairings with Garrett Wilson are Marvin Harrison, Chris Olave, and Drake London, right? And it kind of makes sense by ADP. And I don't necessarily feel super confident that those guys are, way better bets than, Debo Samuel, any of these guys in round 2, Jalen Waddles, Neighbors, Evans. So I've been mixing it up a little bit. We'll get a Garrett Wilson with Debo Samuel here to start us off. And I don't even have to make it a referendum on the great Brandon Ayuk versus Debo Samuel wars because Brandon Ayuk was already off the board. I feel like I've been noticing this more. I don't know what other streamed draft I did. Was it the Pitbull that I did on Best Ball After Dark on Saturday? I think someone went Gibbs Ayuk there as well. That's getting a little bit more popular. It's funny too, because it's like part of the thesis of pushing Brandon Ayuk up is if there was a trade, which at this point seems highly unlikely, even though he doesn't seem too happy with his current status. But if you push Brandon Ayuk up because you think he's getting a new change of scenery, but then you're doing it for the week 17 correlation between the Niners and the Lions, I don't know. Both of those can't be true. But whatever. Live your life. Live a little. Blizzy doing some math for us here. Doing the math and seeing there's 59 days until the Thursday night opener and still needing to do 250 more drafts feels so daunting. Where's the 250 coming from? Is that to get the Gladiator rakeback program number? Where's that 250 coming from? Let me pull up that reminder because I know some people aren't familiar with that. Here it is. Here's the rake back. It looks like, yeah, I'm guessing, Blizzy, you're trying to get to 250 or are you trying to get to 500? For those of you guys who haven't seen this year, Underdog launched a rake back program for best ball specifically. This is backdated to the launch of BBM. So that started on April 29th, and this goes all the way through September 5th. If you hit 150 drafts, you get 10% rake back. If you hit 250 drafts, you get 20% rake back. 500 drafts, 30% rake back. 1,000 drafts, 50% rake back. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to 500. I think I'll get to 250. 500 sounds like a lot. I know Nez on the Badge Bros says he's gunning for that 1,000. Anyone in the chat think they're going to get to 1,000 on Underdog? Yeah. I know there's these accounts on Twitter now where their entire bit is just posting how many days or how many weeks until the start of the season. And I do somewhat appreciate them as a public service announcement, but then I also get triggered by them as well. I'm like, let me just enjoy the summer, man. Don't be constantly reminding me of this impending doom. All right, we got wide receivers flying off the shelves. I'm going to take Higgins here, kind of continue with my MO of not taking Laporta in the 3rd, but happily taking him in the 4th. Pretty crazy wide receiver run here, which we generally see in rounds 2 and 3. Yeah, we're in an avalanche draft if George Pickens is going off the board at 35. John's at 409 drafts completed. Josh is going for 1,000 drafts. If you get to 1,000, you'll never know the touch of grass. Wow. The 12-hole drafter double taps Laporta and Kelsey. I've started Garrett Wilson, Debo Samuel, T. Higgins. I'm going to grab a Derrick Henry share here. I don't really feel like reaching for McBride here. I could take Pittman. I could reach for Amari, but I've been enjoying picking my spots for these anchor RBs. On the first half of the board or in the middle of the board, I've been grabbing some Barkley in the middle of the third round. Barkley went at the 2-3 turn here, but Derrick Henry at 39, 8 picks past ADP. Feel good about that. So we start Derrick Henry and we start Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, and then grab Derrick Henry. And it is kind of one of the funny things with how these ADPs work, where it's like you're feeling out the room. You want to make sure you get that wide receiver. And it's basically just flipping the Derrick Henry and the T. Higgins prices. Normally you could I picked at 34. So that would have been Henry at an ADP of 31. And then T. Higgins ADP of 39 is right where I took Derrick Henry. But I like playing it that way, making sure I get those 3 early receivers. And now I get a 4th round price tag on Derrick Henry, a guy I've been trying to get a little bit more of when the price is right, which has just kind of have been my motto with all of these running backs. I have a decent amount of Achane, but otherwise these guys, Barkley, Kerrane, Henry, ETN, Pacheco, it's like when they fall anywhere from 6 to 10 spots past ADP, I'm grabbing my shares, but otherwise making sure I'm getting my wide receiver firepower there early. Should I pour some coffee? I already had a pre-show iced coffee, but I was feeling generous and got the hot pot of coffee for the crowd. This is how I get all the cheers, the jeers. This is where KZ comes out of the woodwork to tell me how good the coffee pour is. I feel a lot of pressure for the coffee pour these days. Let's give it a shot. I think acoustically, that was a pretty good coffee pour. Around here, a little splash, more splash than I'm, comfortable with, but I was getting a little cocky, elevating the pour, kind of showing off. We'll see what the results say. Ooh, Bill Sickles loves the coffee pour. I'm sorry, Bill. I'm never not going to be able to say your full name. Bill Sickles. It's too good. I do live in fear of the iced coffee. I know when I go to iced coffee, people get upset. So I will play the hits. We're about to be on the clock here. Derrick Henry, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins. See what MP does here. By ADP, we're looking at Josh Jacobs, Calvin Ridley, James Cook, Chris Godwin. MP goes James Cook. I've been wanting to pack some more Xavier Worthy bags. We're going to go ahead and grab him here as our 4th wide receiver. And we'll see what comes back to us at 6'3". So we got the anchor running back and 4 wide receivers through 5 rounds. Nothing too out of the ordinary in this draft so far. Tight ends kind of going where we would expect. Trey McBride at the 4-5 turn. I'm back on the clock here. This is, to me, a decision. Do I get that 5th wide receiver? Do I grab George Kittle? I do kind of like that George Kittle, Deebo Samuel. I do, of course, love the elite tight ends. I click Rome and Jordan Addison a good amount, but let's go ahead and get George Kittle. I think this is kind of close to structurally my favorite start. 4 wide receivers I feel good about, the elite tight end and the anchor running back. I said correlation, opposite correlation with Deebo Samuel, team level correlation. So this will give us Brock Purdy on the menu potentially. Yeah, I like this start. So thinking through some of our quarterback options, obviously Patrick Mahomes is gone. Joe Burrow will be on the menu. Brock Purdy will be on the menu. Aaron Rodgers on the menu. It's so funny to see. I feel like Calvin Ridley, like in more casual rooms, I've now seen him go super early, like 4-5 turn, early 5th round. And then in some of these avalanche rooms, which is counterintuitive, you'd think wide receiver heavy room, why wouldn't Calvin Ridley be part of that? But he does not seem to go as early in some of my streamed rooms. Man, Chief Smoke, can we get Ducks early for my birthday today, Pete? How do we feel about this, guys? Chief Smokes is a YouTube member and it's his birthday. Normally we reserve the Ducks for the third draft with Kerrane. Would you guys indulge a little happy birthday Ducks here? Is anyone actually clicking Hollywood Brown? I think Davis is at the 4-5 turn. Davis's favorite move in drafts is to take Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown and then get sniped on Patrick Mahomes. How rare is the Puka Marvin Harrison Jr. stack? I don't think that rare. It's definitely not chalk, but I don't think it's super rare. All right. This draft is cooking. We're about to be back on the clock here. By ADP, we're looking at Kamara, who I have a pretty hard fade on. Keon Coleman. You know, I've been starting to scoop up a little bit of Coleman on the discount. I like all of these running backs here. I'm going to get one of them coming back in the 8th. Let's grab Coleman. He also gives us week 17 correlation opposite Garrett Wilson. And we'll just keep stacking players on these good teams. We got two Niners. We got a Bengal. We got a Chief. We got a Bill. We got a Raven. Did Josh and Hayden do a show recently where it's like, just take the good players on good teams? Just make it simple, stupid. And now we can grab a running back here. I could take Joe Burrow. I just don't. I like pushing Joe Burrow. Obviously, the Jamar Chase drafter back here. The Jamar Chase drafter has Richardson. He'll probably take Burrow at 92 or 101. I'm okay with that. I think this is the spot to get my second running back. I'm going to take Jonathan Brooks. Aaron Jones is the ADP faller. I do not have any correlation tiebreakers with any of these top running backs, but Brooks was one of the guys I highlighted in the Deposit Kingdom video. That is pinned in the chat, by the way. He is one of the, titular 2 extreme discounts in drafts. We're basically getting kind of a double whammy discount on Jonathan Brooks, where people are worried a bit about the slow start and people are worried about the landing spot, not loving Carolina. Chuba was good last year, yada, yada. But when we really pull back and think about the kind of back-weighted production Jonathan Brooks could offer us, it's pretty tantalizing. And the whole kind of thesis of the video I made was the market kind of overreacts to early season production. And I don't think anyone is disagreeing with the fact that someone like Jonathan Brooks isn't going to rack up a ton of early season production. Maybe he opens the season on PUP. Maybe they ramp him up, similar to what we saw from Breece Hall last year, where Breece Hall was active, but the team was pretty clear and they said, hey, first 5 weeks, he's going to have the training wheels on, and then we'll ramp it up. But those first 4 to 5 weeks of the regular season represent a fragment of the total season. The regular season itself, 14 weeks, is only 25% of the tournament. And I think attacking some of these players who are discounted because of early season production is one of the bigger edges. So I had initially kind of thought, do I chill on Jonathan Brooks right now? Because if he does open up camp on PUP, which is different than opening up the regular season on PUP. When you open up the regular season on PUP, you're missing games. If you open up the season or the training camp on PUP, you can come off whenever. It's almost a meaningless designation other than the fact that you're not ready, for full speed workouts and whatnot. So I think the market will double count it if Jonathan Brooks opens up on PUP, but he is such a clear target to me in this range that I've decided I'm just going to keep packing my bags. And if he gets cheaper, he gets cheaper. If we get pick 100 Jonathan Brooks, I'll happily scoop that up. So we are now at a 251 build. One other nice thing about Jonathan Brooks I should mention as well is I like that it gives you another avenue to a backdoor stack with Bryce Young as well. So there's lots of positives to the Jonathan Brooks click. And we do see Joe Burrow go to the Jamar Chase drafter at 101, which makes complete sense. So our quarterback situation here, Brock Purdy has an ADP of 113. which will be interesting here. Does the Ayuk drafter take? I don't even know what to do with this drafter on the 12 hole. Part of me is wondering if I should not mess around and just grab Purdy. I honestly think I'm going to do that. I think this is a pretty flat tier here. I don't see anything. If there was an extreme value here, I would just scoop it up. But this drafter on the turn has 0 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends. And I think this team starts to get into a tough spot if I get sniped on Brock Purdy. Because then I'm having to build out. I'm looking at Aaron Rodgers and like a Bryce Young backdoor stack. And then I only really have a couple more wide receiver spots available too, since I'm already up to 5 wide receivers. So I do just lock up Brock Purdy. I do try to be very like situation specific of when am I going to push the quarterback and when am I going to try to take the value. And none of my other targets even go between these picks. So I have no problem making sure we lock up Brock Purdy there. Let's go ahead. I'm going to grab Tajay Spears here. Singletary isn't as big of a priority to me when I already have a guy like Derrick Henry. I really like Singletary when he's one of my first or second backs in a 0 RB build. I'm going to take a bigger crack here with Tajay Spears. A little week 15 correlation opposite Higgins, but just trying to get a bigger cut there with that Derrick Henry anchor. So here's the team so far. We got the Brock Purdy double stack with Debo and George Kittle. We got our 3 running backs, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Brooks, and Tajay Spears. We got our 5 wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Debo Samuel, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, and our tight end, George Kittle. Hard to value hound in this room in these rounds 8, 9, and 10. Didn't see many values popping up. We got another lurker here. Nabi, what is up? Artillery Frost doesn't know how a coffee pour turned into the highlight of my morning, but here we are. I don't know how it happened either. Oh, sorry. I forgot that I asked a question and then I get behind on the chat. It seems like people are ready for the Ducks. Here you go. Little birthday Ducks. Was it Chief Matt? Happy birthday, brother. Bill Sickles. Bill Sickles with the Ducks in the chat. Happy birthday, brother. The Ducks are loose. Drafting Burton in the 110s is jail. Did I miss something? Jermaine Burton, did he get drafted? What do you think about picking up Taylor and then getting Chuba later? Jonathan Taylor? Or do you mean Jonathan Brooks? I do like those guys to me. I would put in like Chuba Hubbard, Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman. I think those guys have a place on teams for sure. I've definitely done Chuba sometimes when I feel like I just have too many handcuffs, too many rookies, not a lot of bankable early season production. But it is scary to take those guys because on the flip side, the inverse is true. You're not paying a lot, but you're paying for early season production. And then you have no guarantees that you're going to get production when it matters the most late into the season. All right, let's see here. I have no need for Tua or Jared Goff. By rank here, we could grab another running back. I'm seeing if we have any correlation stuff here. You know what? Let's do Pat Freiermuth. No, he has the same bye. All right, we'll grab Rico Dowdle. Get another running back here. I was going to do Freiermuth, and then I didn't want the bye week bros to come after me. George Kittle and Freiermuth, both week 9. Freiermuth would have been opposite Xavier Worthy week 17. This is a pretty flat tier here. Probably a spot to... I'm trying to think, is there anything with Dalton Schultz? We could do Dalton Schultz. I rarely take Dalton Schultz without Stroud. I don't hate it in this spot. He plays Derrick Henry in week 17, Xavier Worthy in week 16. We could also grab, I think I'm going to do that. We're going to go ahead and grab Dalton Schultz. 6 picks past ADP. I'm thinking through, I could have set up some other late tight end stuff. Conklin's always in play with something with Garrett Wilson. I could do Mike Gesicki with T. Higgins. But yeah, we'll just grab the Schultz value there. And the correlation with some of my early picks is a nice bonus there. Kind of from like a game theory standpoint too, it's a little fun. Like you think a lot of the other bringbacks, people will have premium bringbacks to these stacks. It's like, all right, if your Diggs Derrick Henry or your Tank Dell Derrick Henry, if that's not hitting, and Dalton Schultz is the one having the good game, then also potentially those other Houston pieces are failing in week 17, which is kind of just a little leverage angle, or me just trying to talk myself into this pick even more. Jacob says he can't get around to Brooks over Bowers. I mean, that's like making me choose between my two favorite children. But to me, that's very like team dependent, I click both of them a lot. If I don't have a tight end yet, I'm almost always clicking Bowers there. In this situation, I already had George Kittle. I'm basically not reaching for Bowers as my tight end too there, unless I'm drafting with Shawn. And on this team, I think Brooks is just an awesome. I think Brooks fits on any running back thing. So I don't even want to say, he's an awesome complement to an anchor RB, because I said this in the video too. Like, he is the perfect back for a hyper fragile build. Like, if you need that fourth running back and then you want to shut it down, you're looking for a running back who can see your lineup regularly ahead of those three other studs you presumably drafted. Someone like Jonathan Brooks could easily be a top 10 weekly running back down the stretch, or he can be your first running back in a zero RB room, where you're basically saying, I'm going to have a lot of scrubs, a lot of contingent guys, a lot of, maybe guys with pass catching roles. So I need one anchor who can really establish themselves down the stretch. I do really think Brooks works in a variety of builds like that. All right, let's see here. This might be a spot where I just lock up Rodgers again. I'm trying to see if there's any big ADP values here, anything I need. Yeah, this is like the same spot. I'm normally the guy who kind of pushes quarterbacks, but I'm just not seeing anything right here that is going to force me to not take a quarterback. So I'm just going to take Aaron Rodgers. It's a little bit ahead of ADP, but I'm going to shut it down most likely at quarterback. And then we can figure out if there's any other stacks we want to set up without the quarterbacks. My whole thing with like pushing the quarterback is there some other kind of extreme value? Is there something that I can prioritize here? Let's see. What do I want to do here? We're probably starting to now get back to looking at a wide receiver. I think we're just going to keep reaching. This is going to be my reach draft. I really don't see a big difference with any of these guys. If we take Aaron Rodgers ahead of ADP, let's take Malachi Corley slightly ahead of ADP, lock up that double stack, get another rookie here. This was one of the kind of, one of the first videos I made this year on the Deposit Kingdom channel was the Scroll the F Down video. And I collaborated with the Badge Bros on that. I was talking with Sacrilegious from Legendary Upside. And one of the kind of biggest takeaways is, and Brian Hooper, my co-host on Lulz, pointed this out as well. There's a threshold in drafts around round 13 and 14. And two things happen at this range. One, players are no longer drafted 100% of the time. That's when you start getting guys who are drafted like 98%, 97, etc. Like, there will be drafts where some of these guys aren't drafted 100% of the time. The second thing that happens is ADP is no longer predictive of fantasy performance. ADP in the early rounds is highly predictive of fantasy production. Like the market is really good at saying these guys are going to score the most points. And so if you're reaching a ton in the early rounds, if you're taking a 5th round pick in the 2nd round, that is going to be a losing strategy over time because you are hemorrhaging value. And that 2nd round pick that you're passing on is worth so much more than the 5th round pick. And in the video, I show it on an ADP curve like that. So there's this temptation. The point I'm getting to is there's this temptation when we're value hounds and we always want value to push that too much in the late rounds. Because when you're trying to eke out value, say getting around 14 pick in round 16, you're really just picking up a couple cents of value. Kerrane always talks about it in terms of auction dollars. Think of all of these guys right now at the end of the draft. These are dollar auctions. Chuba nominated for $1. Oh, maybe one person bid him up to $2. Rashad Bateman, $1. Troy Franklin, $1. Malachi Corley. So I even feel this myself where I'm like, damn, I just took Aaron Rodgers ahead of ADP. I just took Malachi Corley ahead of ADP. The ADP, once we get in this range, really isn't predictive. It doesn't matter. And so if you find yourself in spots where you need to lock up the stacks, where there aren't any huge ADP fallers or values that you feel like there's an opportunity cost to reaching for someone else, then I have no problem going out and getting your guys here. So here's the team through 14 rounds. We're about to pick again in the 15th. We got Brock and Aaron Rodgers. We got Derrick Henry, Jonathan Brooks, Tajay Spears, Enrico Dowdle. Wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Malachi Corley. Tight end, George Kittle, and Dalton Schultz. Tyler Conklin goes. I'm gonna keep this Jets reach going. I'm gonna keep the Jets reach going, and I'm gonna grab Braylon Allen here and get my big bet here on the Jets. So we now have Aaron Rodgers, we have Braylon Allen, we have Garrett Wilson, and Malachi Corley. And I think I will do the exact same thing with the Niners backup running back. So we're going to have almost a mirrored team here with a couple Omega stacks. We had Eli Mitchell here as our 6th running back. Normally would not do 6 running backs in kind of like a Derrick Henry build. But I like getting these huge stacks on these teams. So we now have a quarterback, a running back, and 2 pass catchers for both the Niners and the Jets. And then we'll finish this draft out with a couple of wide receiver flyers to round it out. All right, I am behind on the chat here. How did we get Willie Snead mentioned? Is this how far behind we are? Can we get a Best Ball Grandpa does ayahuasca appearance today? Everyone has a price. The right super chat could get it done. Mark got buried in a tight end avalanche here. Yeah, and this is another good tag on the conversation of thinking about the last 3 to 5 rounds. Jay says the last 3 to 5 picks should be so dependent on your team needs and takes that ADP doesn't matter. Yeah, I mostly agree with that as well. And it's the same way I think about correlation, where I'm rarely thinking about correlation through the first 5 or 6 rounds, but once I'm getting in these later rounds, it's one of my primary thoughts here. Braylon Allen feels like one of the best clicks right now. He has to rise big, right? Yeah, I don't think he'll ever rise like, say, Tank Bigsby rose last year. When you look at the Tank Bigsby rise, it was because everyone thought, oh, maybe Travis Etienne is a Fugazi bell cow, and maybe, Bigsby will just be in a 50-50 split with him, and I'm getting standalone value and a massive contingent. And so he rose, like 6 rounds because of that. The market is never going to say Braylon Allen is going to be in a 50-50 timeshare with Breece Hall. I just don't think that's going to happen. But we do see the market be pretty excited about some of these really, pure handcuffs. Like, could they treat a guy like Braylon Allen like Ty Chandler? Sure. Obviously he could move into the Tyler Algier range. It's like a very similar bet to Tyler Algier. A standalone back, or sorry, not standalone, a contingent back behind an established bell cow. So I could see Braylon move up. I think he's probably capped at like the 12th round here. I'd be pretty surprised to see him move higher than that. But yeah, I could definitely see him move into the 12th or 13th. All right. I'm going to have to take some gross wide receivers here. Man, all of my fun wide receivers gone. Jalen McMillan goes at 200. I was hoping Devontae Walker would be here. Let's see. I think Greg Dortch is interesting in this range. We get him opposite Jonathan Brooks in week 16. I think he pairs well with a lot of these rookies. Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Malachi Corley. That could be a lot of, bumpy production out of the gate. Let's get Greg Dortch on here. And you know what I might do? I might just grab... Oh, no, Zay Jones went. I was going to say, what if I just take both of those Arizona receivers? I could play the hits. I select Jalen Hyatt. Probably too much here. You know what we'll do? Let's lean into that idea about the contingent stuff with the Texans. And I'm going to basically stack up Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz, the ancillary Texans pieces, and say, if these guys could help me out in week 17 or 16, because they play the Chiefs in 16 and the Ravens in 17. And if anything happens to Tank, Nico, or Diggs, one or both of these guys could be very relevant. So I like that as a leverage angle. I like building out secondary stacks even without the quarterback. And we'll lock this up. I do want to hit a question here in the chat, and then I'll recap this team. This draft flew by. What did we hop in this like 5 minutes after the start? Was this like a 36-minute Best Ball Mania draft? I wanted to hit this question from AP though. Do you not take into account week 15, 16, 17 stacks through the first few rounds to get more of the elite back stack options, or you think these are too chalky of bets to make, say, Amon-Ra with a 49ers wide receiver? So I talked about this in the correlation video I made on the Deposit Kingdom channel. I should actually just pull this up, and I'll drop this in the chat for you guys, because I know a lot of people around here aren't even aware of this channel. This is a second YouTube channel I have. Here's the video I was just referencing, the 2 extreme discounts to target in drafts right now. This was the correlation video. It's titled, Don't Let the NFL Schedule Fool You, Correlation and Buy Tips. I'm going to post this in the chat, but I talked about this exact thing in this video, but I'll quickly summarize it for you here. The whole point for me of correlation is taking these non-superstar players, the guys that need a game environment to go crazy, right? We're talking about the fringe bets. When I think about the guys in the top 50, the top 60 picks, say a Derrick Henry, say any of these guys, a Stephon Diggs, they can succeed in any game environment. Derrick Henry can just get the ball 25 times and score 2 TDs. Stephon Diggs could get 15 targets and score 2 TDs, even in a low-scoring game. The top players who the offense funnels through, I am not worried about their production in a single game environment. The guys I care about the correlation the most are the fringe guys. A guy like Darius Slayton or Jalen Hyatt. Those guys are not getting fed 10 targets a game. How are they hitting? They're probably hitting in a crazy sped up game where one of them hits for a big play. And so to me, it's like a talent thing. It's like the players who aren't as talented, I want to correlate them. It was the perfect example with this team I just drafted, right? Like Dalton Schultz, Noah Brown, not the most talented football players out there. But when they hit, and we saw this hit last year, Noah Brown had massive games. We saw Dalton Schultz have massive games. When did those big games happen? In games that went bonkers from a fantasy standpoint. That Bucs game, both Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown went nuclear in that game because the entire game environment went nuts. So I don't worry about correlation for the studs. I worry about it more for these side pieces, and that's inside pieces. This is why I talked about the Noah Brown opposite Baltimore and opposite KC, because I'm thinking through, how does Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz hit in week 16 and 17? Well, they hit because they're in shootouts against the Ravens and the Chiefs, and they hit because of maybe a contingent thing. One of those other top 3 guys is out. So that's kind of my stance on it. It's not saying I go out of my way to avoid early correlation, but I think it gets a little mixed up because last year, the Amon-Ra CD Brown example was the nut start. But it was the nut start because it was correlated by ADP. If those teams, Dallas and Detroit, weren't playing together in week 17, they wouldn't have been going, or they still would have been going there at the 1-2 turn. That was just where the market had valued them. And so it was a cherry on top that they played in week 17. But I just don't like reaching for it. I don't like forcing it. I think there's more important things to kind of accomplish in the first few rounds. All right, let's see here. This is a question I've actually been a little worried about. Klafka says, are we sheep taking Kendre Miller and Jamal Williams could just be the primary backup again? Yeah, the Kendre Miller stuff is a little scary. We'll talk to Shawn about it in a few minutes as well, because I know he has some thoughts on it. We talked about Kendre a little bit last week. But yeah, the early training camp reports from Kendre haven't been good. It's one of those where it's like, you basically have to plug your nose and say, am I willing to bet against Alvin Kamara and Jamal Williams? And I mean, Jamal Williams completely faded last year, to where it's hard for me. This is my take. I don't think Jamal Williams is the roadblock for Kendre Miller. I think Kendre Miller is the roadblock for Kendre Miller. It's like either Kendre Miller is just complete dog shit and is going to fumble what's going to be an incredible opportunity for him to eventually take over this backfield, or the offense just isn't going to work on the ground, because I don't think Jamal Williams is the answer either. So even if they start out with Jamal Williams, they're going to have to give Kendre Miller a crack at some point. That's kind of my thought on it. Let me put a bow on this team though, because I know we got sidetracked here before these final picks. Ended up with a 2-6-8-2 build. Brock Purdy and Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Derrick Henry, Jonathan Brooks, Tajay Spears, Rico Dowdle, Braylon Allen, and Eli Mitchell at running back. Wide receivers, Garrett Wilson, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Keon Coleman, Malachi Corley, Greg Dortch, and Noah Brown at wide receiver, and then George Kittle and Dalton Schultz at tight end. One other element about this that I like, and Kyle Dvorchak mentioned this on a video I did with him on the Deposit Kingdom channel. We did a draft and we had a Trevor Lawrence team and we tacked on Tank Bigsby. And the idea of taking a backup running back with the quarterback as being kind of like a double leverage element really spoke to me. And Kyle's case was, hey, if Travis Etienne goes down, not only do we now have the presumed starter in Tank Bigsby, and let's not make this a Tank Bigsby conversation, but not only do we have that, but the team is likely to throw more as well, right? Because they lost, their identity in the running game. So not only are you getting the starting running back, you're also getting more pass volume for your quarterback and stack. And so I really like this here too, on teams where I passed on Breece Hall in round 1. He was the top ADP value to take Garrett Wilson. So now I'm playing out a scenario where if Breece Hall gets hurt, not only is Aaron Rodgers throwing more, but I have the starting running back, and same with Brock Purdy in this Eli Mitchell, where if something happens to CMC, not only are they going to throw more, but I have that starting running back, presumably in Eli Mitchell. So I like thinking through some of those galaxy brain leverage elements, similar with the Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz. Overall, I like this team. I'm glad I grabbed Keon Coleman when I did, because didn't love a lot of the other wide receiver looks I had. You see my next wide receiver pick after 82 didn't come till 159. But I like how this team came together, was able to shut it down at quarterback and tight end. And yeah, a little rare for me to kind of reach to lock up all these stacks, but there were no big ADP values that kind of distracted me. So don't mind how this one turned out. July 8th, BBB 2682, San Francisco, New York Jets. Artillery Frost, do you ever think about MVS or Khalif Raymond there? Let's see, for Detroit for a bring back. Yeah, this was the spot too where I could have done a Khalif Raymond. I don't mind Khalif Raymond. There's actually some interesting, metrics with how he's fared in open score. MVS is a much harder sell for me. But the thing for me here is the correlation, right? So I'm getting week 16 correlation with Greg Dortch in Carolina. So it wasn't just a completely uncorrelated pick. I still want to feel good about the players I'm clicking. And then with Noah Brown, to me, this is another example of I would rather prioritize team level correlation over bringbacks. And so Noah Brown being there with Dalton Schultz was a selling point to me. Hey, let me get another stack on this team, even without the quarterback. But yeah, if there were more intriguing options there for the bringbacks, I think I would have considered it. I just don't think Khalif Raymond quite does it for me. I think you could have made the case, take like Khalif Raymond over Greg Dortch. I don't think that would have been bad. But I was basically looking at these early wide receivers, Worthy, Coleman, Corley, who I think all could have, potentially rough starts to the year as far as getting ramped up to speed. And a guy like Greg Dortch, I think could maybe paper over some of that. Whereas Khalif Raymond could certainly still be, way more boom bust, way more of a week 17 play. And I wanted to make sure I'm, covering enough, just raw projection to get this team advanced. Is Michael Wilson the odd man out in Arizona wide receivers? Yeah, I don't know. I still like Michael Wilson a decent bit, but someone feels like they're going to be the odd man out. Zay Jones has been fine. We saw him earn targets at a decent clip, even in a crowded offense in Jacksonville. So, it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out because McBride and Harrison are going to be, dominant target earners. And there's not room for both of those guys, Greg Dortch, Zay Jones, and Michael Wilson. I think I'm more viewing Michael Wilson closer to the Darius Slayton types, right? Where I think he's going to get loose for some big games, but it's harder to see like a true breakout from him now with how much, crowded target competition there is there. What is up, Mark? Thank you for this super chat here. Clay, this week's Week 17 Sleeper is brought to you by Marriott Bonvoy. Bed so soft you'll dream about your playoff correlations. Thank you, Clay. Let's see here, catching up on the chat. I am sorry. I'm a lame streamer in that I have no thoughts on the wide receiver 3 in Philly. I have not been taking Johnny Wilson, or is it Anus or Anais Smith? I've messed that one up before. I don't have takes on that. For me, those are the spots that I'm going to be ready to move on quickly once we start to get training camp news, right? Where it's like, I don't want to guess on that right now. Like, I feel pretty confident Greg Dortch is going to be on the field running routes, I'd rather take some bets like that than trying to guess on a guy who could just be an absolute stone cold zero. Even a guy like Noah Brown. He's going to be on the field when they run 4 wide receiver sets. I think the Texans will run some of those this year. I know he's not going to be a stone zero, whereas some of these rookies on the depth chart, they could just be on the practice squad. And so I want to move quickly if we hear positive buzz. Last year we heard positive buzz on Tank Dell, on Puka, on Jaden Reed, on these guys who ended up emerging. So that's one where it's like, all right, once training camp starts up, let's put our ears to the ground. There's going to be tons of people sifting through athletic articles, beat reports, all of this stuff. And then you want to start to move on these guys. But if you think about it too, those guys have low ownership as is right now. Even if we got the most glowing report tomorrow that Johnny Wilson is the guy in Philadelphia as the wide receiver 3, this tournament is, how full is this tournament right now? Where are we? Best Ball Mania is 37%. So even his max, ownership percentage is probably going to be around 60% if he started getting taken in every single draft from here on out. So that would still be a leverage angle to have a guy like that who wasn't drafted for the first, 40% of the contest. So that's kind of my take on those guys. I'm just not trying to guess as much on those right now, but I think there'll be a time and a place to get those guys. We are going to have Shawn Siegele swinging by here in a second. He just sent me over some of his updated ranks, so I'm going to get those uploaded. I also want to show you guys the new FantasyLife site here as well. As I mentioned, that dropped just this morning. We got the new look FantasyLife site up. Also, a new premium offering as well. Everything is revamped. New look on the website, new look on the newsletter. I'm going to be writing that 5 days a week coming here shortly. And all kinds of tools now as well. If you guys are used to a league sync tool too for your home leagues, being able to see who's available on the waiver wire relative to, our ranks and projections, all of that is going to be available. All kinds of good stuff here. I'll give you a quick peek at that. Here we are. Yeah, here's the league sync. You can also get all of our best ball content over here. Got a bunch of stuff too here for you best ball guys. If you want to go through and look at advance rates for players last year, that's all here. Obviously, we have the Best Ball Hub. This is a free tool where you guys can upload your CSV and see all of your kind of combinatorial pairings. You can see who you have most with your Week 17 bringbacks. I have a tutorial here on the site as well. And also we got Best Ball rankings up on the site now. That is going to be part of the premium package, which you guys can get access to here as well. They got a couple different price points. $3.33 per month for just tier 1. Very affordable if you guys want those custom rankings, the draft champion, tiers, cheat sheets, start sit tool, rate my draft. And then for $8 a month, you get projections for all the sports, NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, all the sports betting tools, the DFS tools, all of that. So all kinds of cool stuff going on over at FantasyLife this year. Make sure you guys check that out. And without further ado here, I am going to get cooking with the Best Ball Banana Stand up next. We got RotoViz's Shawn Siegele. Welcome to the Best Ball Banana Stand. This is a weekly show hosted by me, Peter Overzet, where I'm joined by RotoViz's Shawn Siegele, and we get into a Best Ball Mania 5 draft room. We battle the wide receiver avalanches and try to build a team that can compete for that $1.5 million top prize. Shawn, coming off a fun 4th of July weekend, all kinds of contests in the lobby. How you doing?
Good. I had a chance to play some of those pit bulls there. Do the 15-second clock that you were talking about. That was a lot of fun. I did see some more opportunity to get unique players at different points in the draft in that format. So that was fun.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that? Like what was different for you from some of the other drafts?
Well, I kind of said on the show last week something that wasn't really true, which is that I that I'm more aware of ADP, or I try to get more ADP value when I'm not drafting with you. Really, you and I try to do the best that we can within the context that we're given because of some of the research we have out on the site. And because I do think there's still a little bit of value, even if it's mostly for your own fun, of putting together some different style wide receiver teams where maybe you do actually reach 5, 6, 7 slots early on and pair some receivers that aren't generally going together, but also you just get your guys, right? You get the rankings values, even if you don't get the ADP values. And if we don't have any conviction on the rankings, there's kind of no point, right? So you get some of those early, but then I was seeing players, 5 to 7 spots below ADP in that round, say 7 to 13 range that you just basically never see. Even when I do the late night West Coast drafting, where things can be a little bit wilder and you do have a chance to take advantage of some more ADP value. So it's fun to be able to get one of your guys early and then still come out with overall ADP value on your team. That can be a little bit tough in most cases if you do one of those early reaches. What
was your experience with the shorter draft clocks? Were you enjoying that?
I love it. I mean, when everybody else is on the clock, you're like, let's take it down to 5.
Yeah, I know. I was talking through it the other day, how it's so interesting. You think about some of the high stakes sites, right? Where they'll have, 90-second clocks. And there's this element of, hey, might be your one high stakes draft. You want to enjoy it. You want to savor it. You want to talk through all of the elements. But when you're ripping hundreds of best ball teams, it's like 5-second clock. Let's get this moving here so I can get a few more of these in.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun. I did think that maybe because of the time pressure and maybe because just some of the values had gotten, somewhat obscene or absurd, I did have some people breaking some of the late-ish, like late window to, early, just, late QB builds that I had set up that would have been very nice, and drafters who, maybe with more time would have gone to a different player, but they went ahead and grabbed that QB 1 or 2 slots ahead of me. So.
It's funny you say that, because in the draft I just did, it was kind of uncharacteristic of me. And I actually think you and I have found ourselves in this spot a few times where I basically reached around to get my quarterback to lock up a stack. I had, Debo and George Kittle, and I, took Brock Purdy 10 picks ahead of ADP, because I'm looking around. I'm like, there's no strong ADP value. There's no ranking value here. I'm in a flat tier of running backs. I know one of them is going to come back. And I'm like, do I really want to push the quarterback just because I think I can, or do I just lock up the stack? And to me, that's kind of what we're always trying to balance. It's like, if there's this extreme value that you didn't think was going to be there, you want to take advantage of that. But if there's not that opportunity cost, it's like, let me just lock up this stack.
Yeah. And you definitely want to do that. I think the flip side in this situation that I ran into, maybe even more in these drafts than normal, was like getting to 5 really good running backs, almost all of them being ADP values. And then sometimes that 5th running back can get in the way of the QB. Sometimes as it continues through, and you really have set it up so it only needs to be a 5 running back team. But then the draft gives you a 6th guy who's a priority target, like well below ADP. And you're kind of working through the consequences of maybe being too light there at QB because you've pushed it, versus how powerful that running back room could be, what that would mean if you did unfortunately get an early injury, what it would mean for filling the flex. And one of the things that we do have to look at some in 2024 is that, despite the fact I think you want to lean into the Avalanche, as Michael Dubner wrote for us and was published on Friday, the Be the Avalanche article, there are going to be some cases where running backs have so many more implied points at, certainly when you get into these fun 8, 9, 10, 11 rounds, that the possibility for them to fill the flex a little bit more often than maybe they have in some structures you've done in the past that seem similar. You want to keep that in mind. And then a few of these teams, I went very tight end early. Blair's looked this past week at bully tight end, what the history is, how that works, what the evidence says, what the logic of it is. Pete, I know that you and I have drafted a lot of tight end heavy teams, but I think that the prices that we're getting on running back in 2024 are not so much now an invitation to exploit that directly, but to exploit it actually through the elite tight ends, and then still getting to those running back values, because the players you're being given in rounds 7 through 13 are so strong at that position. So those are kind of the interesting things that are popping up just in general, but then they can be exaggerated sometimes in these shorter clocks where maybe you get just some more opportunities. So that was a lot of fun.
How are you thinking about, this is probably as close to the end of the dead period I feel like we're going to get. I know you just sent me over your updated rankings. I am curious, what is, filtering into some of the movement you're making right now, because there isn't a lot of news. There isn't a lot of stuff about a guy tearing up training camp. I remember last year, you and I were drafting every week. We were watching James Cook go higher up the draft board in late July and August as, enthusiasm built around him. I haven't really seen that kind of, news related steam yet. So how are you thinking about this draft window? What are the things that are causing you to adjust your ranks?
Yeah. So I want to make sure that before we start getting to the really heavy news time and we get reports, which some of them are going to be very relevant and should move players, and you have to know what's happening in order to understand the depth charts correctly. And then in some cases, we're just simply going to have whoever made a fun catch on that day get talked about, and that's going to move them up. It doesn't really change their fantasy outlook, but it is fun. We all want to be talking about football when guys do make amazing catches. It's exciting. It's fun. Those things will be circulated. But in order to have a good understanding of where that player should go, and as you're trying to parse out which things actually are relevant and move those players up, I do think having a good base and to be well calibrated on the most likely scenarios from a team level and then from a player talent level, understanding some of the history of it, that part is important. And I kind of I love this dead period because it gives you a chance without, so much buzz in your head, so many things that can be distracting you from doing good analysis, to get deep into some of the players. And so I'll have a couple pretty deep articles coming out in the next week or so. That one I keep teasing on on the Seahawks. Going to be looking at what I think is the running back room that kind of fits for 2024 to do, your plan last year of, Miami back in every draft. I mean, that one was so perfect, but it's going deeper into the research on individual teams and players. Ben and I had a lot of fun last week on Stealing Bananas, working through the teams that he has projected so far, and discussing things with you, discussing things with Ben, having those great conversations with Colin, all of those types of things. Really try and remain open-minded about them, as opposed to defending my own current take or current ranking, so that I have the most accurate view of the players before we start getting all the news.
Yep. That's to me too, of like, I know a lot of people want to backweight their drafts, because that information is so valuable. We know that, but there is an element. Well, one, for me, it's like, drafting throughout the whole summer is just very fun, and I wouldn't be able to get in all my drafts if I didn't, but it's also keeps you sharp, so that when those moves do happen, you know how to take advantage of a uniquely specific opportunity, because you know how it fits in with the overall draft picture. I think it's hard. Like, I know when I draft my first big board drafts of the year, I'm like half these players, I don't know what I'm doing with right now. How am I supposed to value that? So I do like staying sharp and then being able to take advantage of those movements as they come. Shawn, I did hop us into a draft. We got the 1-4, a fun start for us here, because Justin Jefferson goes off the board at 1-1. We might be in for some fun shenanigans in this draft. Tyreek Hill goes. You rarely see CMC fall to 4, and yet Jamar Chase is ahead in the ranks. I am okay to go either direction here. What do you think?
Well, it seems like we actually had a similar choice on a previous show and went with Chase. I'm ready to go with McCaffrey here and see if we can still get it done after that early running back pick.
Yeah, and I think you also start to get some elements. It's a little negligible. CMC falls to 2. Okay, that happens a decent amount. When he falls to 4, you start to open yourself up to potentially a player combo at 21 that is pretty rare. If we are able to get an 8, I'll just say, say a guy like Chris Olave fell. Like, how many CMC Chris Olave teams are there? There's not a lot. So that starts to be especially intriguing to me when CMC falls.
Yeah, so we're begging this streak of badge drafters across the middle to let some values fall there.
I will say I do tip people off in the Discord. I don't know if it's because the pit bull's up, if because people are just kind of wanting to chill, but people have not been piling in the draft rooms today quite as much. And I notice I don't recognize a lot of these names, not a ton of badges. Compared to usual. I've definitely been in these rooms where it's just 12 red badges. So who knows? Maybe it's not quite as friends and family as it normally is. And look at this, Shawn. Jahmyr Gibbs goes 7 ahead of Bijan. Brees still on the board. This is one of probably the weirder round 1 draft boards I've seen all year.
I love it. I mean, put a few unique combinations out there. I know that is not necessarily the emphasis, but I love what some of these drafters are doing. Yeah.
And we'll see here too, kind of how this shakes out. The interesting thing to me for the Gibbs reach, it's not like, oh, I can't see a scenario where he could, be the RB2 on the year and be appropriately valued here. Like, that thesis checks out to me. It's thinking through, like, what are you gaining from a combo standpoint? Whatever pick you take with Gibbs here at 18, you would have been able to take when you draft from the 11 or the 12. Gibbs with whichever one of these players you end up taking. So that's my only thought there, of how much are you gaining by that? But if you have this stance, I want to be overweight on Jahmyr Gibbs. Well, one way to do that is you got to take him ahead of his ADP a few times.
And there could be some players there in round 3 that you're looking at and thinking, I want those 3 guys together. I think that's going to be the winning combination. So it could be dropping down even, further rounds than that 1-2. Because as you say, that 1-2 combination should be available to you.
Yep. We see the Breece Hall drafter goes Jonathan Taylor. I don't see that combo a ton. Someone in the first draft was asking me if Puka Marvin Harrison was rare. And then we see it in back-to-back drafts here. Devontae Adams goes a little higher than he normally does to the AJ Brown drafter. But yeah, I think this could be a fun room, Shawn. It seems like we are going to get some interesting, at least starts here for most of these teams.
Yeah. So we see Waddle going up in there. We have Devontae Adams, whom we've discussed on the show, going very early. You get the A.J. Brown, Devontae Adams combination. Some guys I'm a little bit skeptical about after, I mean, Brown's efficiency was so bad in the second half of the season, which is shocking for him. Obviously, you expect some of that to bounce back with one of the greatest players in the NFL. Adams could be a little bit different. I was going to suggest, sort of just big picture, that I think Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave could be, it doesn't have all the same elements, obviously, but that CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown combination from last year where you could get it, at the turn there, and it was much more powerful than things people could get early in the draft, and you'd be frustrated, maybe you get a late pick, but it turns out actually to be the best. As you mentioned, if Olave had fallen, that would have been our preference.
So I do think Debo CMC is pretty interesting if we just want to make that big bet on the Niners. He is at the top of your ranks, top of ADP as well. Actually, Barkley is. But which direction would you like to go?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go with Debo Samuel there. I've had him ranked ahead of Ayuk all off season. When you go through the scoring profiles for those two players, there are just more ways for Samuel to win. And I think people maybe have misunderstood his scoring profile up to this point. And then sort of discussing it with Ben last week, where, I mean, he has Samuel projected higher. It came out that way in his projections, and a lot of the things that Ben is taking into account as he puts those together are not necessarily unique, but very advanced. And I think he ends up with a great feel for those teams, so that, you want to be careful about someone else agreeing with you and be, oh, I was right. But that part of it was something that it's nice when the logic that you are using and that you've worked with for several years on a team and a player is also validated by somebody who's looking at it from a slightly different perspective. I think Debo has a chance, to be a top 5 wide receiver this year.
Yeah. And he has been, Ayuk has been going ahead of him pretty regularly. Ayuk went at the 1-2 turn in my first draft this morning. He goes 1 pick ahead of him here. We're about to pick in the 3rd round. We started with our 2 Niners, CMC and Debo, all wide receivers on this side of the board after the Debo pick. Evans, Metcalf, Neighbors, DJ Moore, and Devontae Smith. We'll see what the drafter does here at 3-3. And then we will be on the clock looking like ADP wise. Achane comes off the board. Barkley has fallen 7 spots. We got Diggs, Kupp, Laporta at the top of the ranks. Where do we go here?
Yeah, I think it's your preference between Diggs and Kupp for this particular team. Obviously, Kupp is a slight ADP value. There are some mild arguments that Diggs maybe makes it easier to manage the buys as you go through, but I like both of those guys here.
Yeah, let's grab I don't think we've done a Cooper Kupp team. I know we've been getting a decent amount of Diggs, kind of where you have him in the ranks, a very light tiebreaker to Kupp playing against the Niners in week 15. I'm not, uber prioritizing week 15, but in a spot like that where I'm looking at these two guys, ADP value, ranking value, maybe just push toward that slight correlation tiebreaker and starts us with CMC, Debo, and Cooper Kupp here.
Yeah, I really like that team. Obviously, Kupp has been getting a lot of buzz. I don't think that should probably change your, overall picture of where he's going that much, but it does alleviate, I think, concern over the real downside scenario. And once you remove the idea that he could be done, then, honestly, he probably should be going about 204.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting in how kind of ADP works, right? Where it's like the market is factoring in like, hey, if Puka is the alpha there, if Cooper Kupp continues to, tail off, deal with injuries, what have you, this is baking in that risk. And essentially the ADP kind of middles it, right? Where it's like, it's probably going to be on one of the extremes. Either he's way undervalued or way overvalued at this price. And so, playing it, both ways makes sense where you're fading him on some teams, but then the teams you do take him, well, we're playing this as the one, obviously, where he's completely back to form. You're still very much in on Puka as a 1st round pick though, right?
I am. I think those guys can squeeze out almost all of the other target competition on that team. And it just is going to be very, very concentrated except for sort of the one-off touchdowns that make some of the other players on the team viable for specific types of things that you're trying to accomplish with best ball. But I mean, even when he was well less than 100% last year, he was able to draw targets at a rate that more or less tracked with Puka. The problem was that his efficiency had dipped way down. If the explosiveness is back, if defenses can no longer focus on him, I really like the offenses where you have the 1-2, where you have Nakua and Kupp, where maybe you have Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride. Both of those players go here to the drafter out of 12. The volume there, when you have a couple of elite players, doesn't concern me, because I think that in some ways it raises the floor and creates a lot of problems for defensive coordinators.
Yeah. And I mean, it's also like, it doesn't take, there's some of these offenses, right, where the environment is just going to be wildly different. The Falcons are one of them. There's so many new variables. There's not that many new variables with the Rams. We kind of know what we're going to get. The biggest question mark is like, how much does Corum get involved, I think, there. But from the passing game standpoint, they didn't add anything of note in the passing game. It seems like what we got last year, which was a highly condensed offense with Cooper Kupp and Nakua, is what we're going to get this year. And if that doesn't happen, I mean, something went terribly wrong, either from an injury standpoint or Stafford just completely falling off.
Yeah, so you're hoping Stafford stays healthy. You're probably hoping that the weird tight end depth chart that they put together doesn't siphon very many targets. They've gone through stretches where the tight end has this extremely low ADOT and, pretty consistently acts as the outlet. And I don't think that they're going to need to have that when you have two guys like Nakua and Kupp who get open so quickly off the snap.
All right, we have started with CMC, Debo, and Cooper Kupp. It's funny, my first draft just absolutely ripped. You would have thought it was a 15-second draft. This one, a little more methodical, but given Shawn and I plenty of time to talk through some of these spots. We'll see what the drafter here does at 4-8. We're about to make our pick at 4-9. We did see a run on tight ends here. Trey McBride, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce all come off the board in the 4th round. Shawn, looking at rank, we got ETN, Kincaid, and then a bunch of wide receivers. I think most of the wide receivers will be available to us in the 5th. Do you have a preference on where to go here?
Yeah, I've been trying to get more Kincaid, so I think that is a fun play. It's never too early to start trying to make sure we have enough wide receivers. So if you had a guy there you wanted, I'd definitely be good with that. But Kincaid, probably the mix of incentives here.
Yep. Kincaid was one of the guys when I did kind of a review of my teams after 50 drafts that I wanted to get more of. I'm actually going to work with Michael Dubner, I think, on a video for next week, kind of my favorite players in each round. And he was kind of going through some of my percentages, and I'm at 15% Andrews. I am up to 10% Dalton Kincaid, but this will continue to help me kind of boost that up. I wanted to make sure I didn't have blind spots in my elite tight end portfolio, where I do kind of want to be a little agnostic and wanting to have shares of all of these guys. And, similar to zero RB, where it's like, you want zero RB to be the thing that hits, not this one specific player over and over. And that's kind of how I feel about these tight ends. I certainly prefer Trey McBride to Kincaid, but not to a confidence interval where I want to be, underweight Dalton Kincaid.
McBride fell to me somehow perfectly in basically all of those pit bulls. So
wow,
if he has a Travis Kelce type of season, then the pit bull should be a good format for me.
McBride is wild because I'll see this happen a ton where the drafter on the turn will take him early 4th round because they are wanting to get that correlation, with Harrison, with Nakua, or like you'll see him fall. He has kind of a wide delta for his ADP where he's rarely going like middle of the 4th. It's either he's going early or falling. ETN does come back to us. It could be a little dicey with 2 running backs, a tight end, and only 2 wide receivers. How do you think we play this considering we have the CMC anchor?
Yeah, I usually go ahead and take Keenan Allen here. I am trying to get my Xavier Worthy up a little bit, but I don't know that is the perfect fit for what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I mentioned the same thing on my draft earlier and grabbed Xavier Worthy. He was one of those guys, and this is kind of goes back to what we were talking about when you draft all season, where I don't want to say I got bored of drafting Xavier Worthy, but I drafted so much of him in the big board. I drafted so much of him when the contest opened, when he was cheaper, and you just knew he was obviously going to be on a meteoric rise with people getting excited about him in this Chiefs offense. And then it kind of felt like, okay, I'm good. But then I start to think through these things where it's like, we're getting more information. We're theoretically drafting better teams as the season progresses. You want Xavier Worthy as part of those teams. Like, you don't want him exclusively on your early teams when you actually had the least amount of information. So that's something I'm personally trying to push through, of like, not fatigue drafting a guy or boredom, but just making sure if you have strong, takes on a player, you're going to want him as part of different chunks of your portfolio throughout the offseason.
And I've chatted with some of the high volume drafters who, are more or less deploying our RotoViz rankings, or the RV rankings are a big input into how they're setting their board up. And I'm getting this feedback that they have these absurd Xavier Worthy shares. I'm thinking to myself, I need to either get that for myself or I need to move the ranking down, because one of those two things has to correct a little bit. I think that Worthy has been like mildly tricky, in part because all 4 of the teams with a week 6 bye are heavy targets for me. You have the Dolphins there, where you're taking Hill. When you have that pick, you're taking Waddle when you come back through. So you're already set up for that often early. Obviously, in this draft, we have the Cooper Kupp pick. I think that Jordan Addison is one of the most undervalued players. And then all of the Chiefs guys are very viable. And all of those picks are early. And so if you end up with all of them on the same team, then there are some things that maybe don't work as well as you're trying to just make all of the different elements of your overall team construction work. So that's knocked it down a tiny bit for me. But I mean, part of it is just we are getting some fun players in this range. And that, I think, is an element for me why, when you look at the board as you have it up right here, where round 4 tends to be either starting out with that tight end because it's perfect for the tight ends, or I think it can be a round where you reach for a receiver by a round, because I think the receivers in round 5 are better than the wide receivers in round 4.
Yeah. And that's a fun take too. And it goes back to that idea of thinking through ADP through a tiers lens. And if you are fully tethered to ADP there, you're always going to end up with a similar combo, or you're never going to have Keenan Allen and Jaden Reed on the same team together because you're playing it there. But if you have a confidence in your tiers and say this block of players is together, then you want to jumble them up in whatever fashion. That's what I've been doing. Like, I took on my first draft, I did Garrett Wilson with Deebo Samuel, reaching, because I'm like, I have Garrett Wilson with the Olaves, with the Marvin Harrison, with the Londons. I want to have some Garrett Wilson with some of these other guys who I don't view that much differently from the early round 2 ADP guys. So I think having confidence, because we don't want to be constantly reaching just willy-nilly, right? We have to have a purpose for doing it. I think understanding tiers is probably the best way to execute that.
And kind of going back to our very first thought about Jahmyr Gibbs, I don't think that you want to take Garrett Wilson ahead of the top 4 guys, but you can start taking him at 5 occasionally and get access to an early 3rd round pick that maybe you couldn't get with him otherwise.
So it looks like the top ranking and ADP values for us would be Kenneth Walker and George Kittle if we wanted to do a bully tight end again. JSN, of course, sitting here. Some other wide receivers, Brian Thomas, Deontay Johnson, Watson. What do you think?
I think we could go with Brian Thomas, or do a reach, or if you wanted to get the second running back, but I'd probably prefer a receiver.
Yeah, let's do Brian Thomas. Yeah, I don't know if we've taken him a lot. He, is obviously below a couple of these guys in your rankings. Brian Thomas is also nice because he opens up another potential stacking option for us. How have you been kind of thinking about him, both as a prospect and how he fits into your draft plans?
I don't have a ton, because I do think that there are a lot of picks in this range that are very, very strong, but he's somebody who, when I don't have another pick, I'm trying to feather him in a little bit, in part because I think he has explosive upside if he does hit, toward the top end outcome. The other part is, as you mentioned, it opens up a QB that, as I kind of worked through, I moved Trevor Lawrence a little bit higher, a little bit higher, a little bit higher. And he fits really, I mean, he often really falls. So you can get potentially access to one of those situations. But he, like the other QBs we have set up here Caleb Williams will be an early window, but then you have Purdy and Lawrence as kind of mid to almost late window, even with Lawrence. And then we also have Matthew Stafford. One of the things I really like to do, receiver teams, or really just any of the teams, they should all be fairly heavy wide receiver, but those receivers set up a lot of options for you at QB, so you can wait and take advantage of the running back values as opposed to feeling forced at that wide receiver position.
We're on the clock. Kenneth Walker goes one pick before us. Looking at your ranks, Jones, Jameson Williams, Brooks, of course. What do you think the direction we go here is? I mean, Jameson is the bring back on the Niners stuff.
That would probably be my reach. I know you're not super high on him. I do have a decent amount of him specifically because he's sort of that last really strong option to make the 49ers work. And I try to make sure I don't lean into this part with too many players or very often. And when Jameson Williams has an ADP, now I have him ranked in a range where this is fine, but the ranking is very aggressive and probably too high. But the reason for that is because of what it allows us to do here, and because I don't think that Jameson Williams needs to score on a full season level the way most of these players would need to score to work. When you have him with the 49ers, and when I just think that his spike weeks have the potential to be really big. I mean, he already had that spike week potential in very low volume. If he becomes a full route guy and they do talk him up, I think that there are some problems with, Jared Goff is an underrated quarterback at this point. I think he deserves to be considered from a reality perspective in a higher tier than he is. But certainly the weakness would be trying to really get that deep ball out there. Even just in the very first games that Williams played, I mean, he was open for some deep touchdowns and Goff underthrew him. I don't think that is necessarily going to completely change, but the spike week upside with what we've already done and with the 49ers, I like him there. It's also a thing where I think that JSN is the end of the wide receiver window. I think that once he goes, you're more or less done, and you need to have a lot of guys by that point. I think Williams is the one justifiable reach that's kind of in this range. There are a couple of other players you can use before it gets really late, but mostly once JSN is gone, you should be waiting until, probably that 13, 14 range, other than maybe like two guys, but Williams would be the exception for me.
Yeah. And I mean, that honestly was a tricky spot for us. I think Kenneth Walker kind of would have been an easy click if he fell to 76, just get that second running back there at a nice value. A lot of the other running backs available all feel pretty flat to me. Like the ones, and with CMC, you have such a wide moat to be able to kind of push things. So I did like the idea of going wide receiver. I think the only other direction I would have maybe considered, and again, it's a weird spot since we already had the tight end, but doing like Evan Ingram to pair with Brian Thomas, really build out that Jag stack, or just play the hits and take Brock Bowers there. Both of those guys go in the subsequent picks after there. But I kind of think that was a gross spot in the draft where it almost feels like you're reaching at every position. Like there was nothing there clean that made it an obvious pick.
Yeah, and that's a good way to describe it, and a good explanation too for why Williams works as a reach there, where in most cases, you'd love to have him below ADP as opposed to above.
Yeah, and you're kind of saying, that he could, with this team that we're building, obviously playing a very week 17 thing. We already know what Jameson Williams versus the Niners in an important game looks like. So that's not hard. And then I think then the pushback would be, what kind of actual breakout potential do you need at these prices? But then when you look at the wide receivers going after him, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, it's a much lower bar to clear. I do want to just be very purposeful and intentional about the kind of teams I'm putting him on. But when we're building out this Niners thing, again, also gives us another quarterback option. Feel a bit better about that. So here's the team so far. No quarterbacks. We got CMC holding things down. He fell to us at pick 4. We took the plunge there. Wide receivers, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Brian Thomas, and Jameson Williams. And we got our tight end, Dalton Kincaid here. As expected after Jameson, we've seen a string of non-wide receiver picks. Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel, the only two wide receiver picks, the only 2 wide receiver picks to go. And we're about to pick here on the clock after a bunch of running backs go. Jonathan Brooks just almost falls back to us. What do you see here, Shawn? By ranks, it's our guy, DeAndre Swift, James Conner, Zach Moss, Raheem Mostert are also here.
Yeah, I think Swift to go with Keenan Allen is interesting and a good value. I think that James Conner opposite Cooper Kupp is interesting.
I've been trying to get a little bit more James Conner. I've seen a little enthusiasm for him in a way that makes me think he could slowly be on the rise. Whereas Swift, I've been clicking a lot, but he's also been falling. I've gotten him in the triple digits a decent bit. So let's go ahead and grab James Conner there. I do like that opposite Cooper Kupp there. And he's a nice pairing there with CMC.
Yeah, it's easy to miss or just not to give him credit for how dominant his season was on a per touch basis last year. Led, I believe, the NFL in yards after contact per attempt, had a really nice evasion rate. He's not one of those guys who's going to break a lot of 60-yard runs, but the space that Cardinals offense could create this season with Harrison in addition to McBride, and then what Kyler Murray could do. I mean, he may face some of the easiest defenses to run against of any running back in football. And, when you have the mobile quarterback and you're trying to pick those guys early, you're worried about trade-offs when you're trying to pick a guy who just had that good of a season in round 8. And as you mentioned, where the early, and, one of the things about drafting now versus drafting in a month and a half is that we'll know whether or not these early reports have any validity. But right now they're claiming he's going to be the guy, and Trey Benson is more of a pick for the future.
I know. Yeah. We should talk about that when we get another second here. Caleb Williams, if we wanted to lock up the stack, or we could take another running back, Raheem Mostert's the ADP value. What do you think?
Yeah, I always have a hard time passing on Mostert when he's the ADP value. I also don't mind Njoku, who I do actually include as kind of the last guy in my elite tight end group, but probably Mostert.
Ooh. Okay, I was playing a little shuffling there at the last second. I
actually prefer Njoku. I'm glad that the software got us there.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking through a few things. Again, knowing like with CMC here, we don't necessarily need that running back production. Njoku gives us another quarterback stacking partner there, and I feel like. There's kind of similarities to the archetype that we're getting with James Conner and Raheem Mostert. So yeah, I think we could have gone either way there, but your little peak of interest there in Njoku. How are you thinking about him? He's been someone I haven't been clicking a lot, mainly because I'm either having an elite, I'm grabbing Brock. Also kind of knowing his splits were pretty stark between Joe Flacco and Deshaun Watson. How are you thinking about him in this offense this year?
Yeah, and you do have to keep in mind that some of that production in some way, shape, or form is probably a little bit inflated. But I think in most cases, if you were like, well, David Njoku managed to weather the fact that he had to play with Joe Flacco last year, you'd be like, oh, well, if he was still successful with Flacco, then he could probably be successful anyway. I mean, he played with some quarterbacks who were worse than the two of them, which pulled down his, he actually performed pretty well with the like 5th string type of guys that they ran out there. I would be surprised if they don't find ways to use him after what he did to close the season. And one of the things that's kind of easy to miss, a little bit similar to the situation we had with Evan Ingram, where Evan Ingram, did some things early, and then he's in a bad offense. He looks bad or just very mediocre for a long time. He gets into this better situation, and it becomes very obvious, oh, Evan Ingram is one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. He's one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL. I mean, David Njoku is an absolute freak athlete. You talk about guys getting open. I mean, there are some players on that team that we like, but I mean, who's more athletic between Njoku and Amari Cooper?
Yeah.
It's probably not even that much of a question, right? So I think there are some fun things he can do if the offense works.
Yep. So here's the team. Christian McCaffrey, James Conner, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Brian Thomas, and Jameson Williams, and then Dalton Kincaid and David Njoku at tight end. Seeing a pretty big fall on Jordan Love here, which is always kind of interesting. He had typically been a guy that I don't see fall a ton because he is so viable to backdoor stack, where even if someone doesn't already have a Packer, they say, hey, I'll grab, Dobbs, I'll grab Wicks, I'll grab Musgrave, I'll grab Lloyd. But I have noticed him falling a little bit more lately. Otherwise, nothing too out of the ordinary in this room. Raheem Mostert did go a couple picks after us, as well as Brian Robinson. I did want to hit on Trey Benson. You mentioned him. He goes at pick 108. He has been sliding a little bit more. There has been some of that rhetoric. Hey, this is James Conner's team, which to an extent, makes sense. James Conner has been so good. I don't think anyone was going into the season thinking, Trey Benson was going to just leapfrog him from day one. I've always thought of him as a contingent bet, and yet you do hope for a little standalone. Let's get on the field early, see some explosive plays. Are you kind of docking Benson with this news, or is it kind of too early to overreact to that?
I think it's probably too early. At the same time, there is an element where this backfield is probably not any different and might actually be more skewed in the other direction than, say, the Josh Jacobs, Lloyd backfield, where, Lloyd might actually be much more of a threat to Jacobs than Benson is to Conner. And if that's the case, the ADPs on those various players are exploitable in a more exaggerated way than I think people are maybe thinking about it. And it's obviously exploitable in some ways already, but on the one team, you want to go for the starter. On the other team, you want to go for the backup. ADP is giving that to us as the play to start with. And I think a lot of drafters are doing that. It might be even better than it seems right now.
Well, we did just lose out on a Caleb Williams value slide to a drafter who only has 2 wide receivers, and they are Amon-Ra and Chris Olave, unstacked there. So would have been fun to see Caleb come back to 117. That is all right. We have built out plenty of Caleb Williams teams, and we also have a lot of stacking options. Actually, all 3 of the quarterbacks coming up here are potential stack partners. Lawrence does go. That removes 1. Do we lock up a quarterback here, or do we grab a guy like Chase Brown now?
Yeah, I think that you can take him. There are going to be options as we come back around. And so we probably should just go ahead and take Purdy with some of the players that we're going to have.
Yeah, Purdy does, fall here. The other Niners drafters are behind us. As far as Brandon Ayuk, so maybe a little less of a concern. But again, this is the same spot I've been in a few times where it's if there's not a screaming guy we want, obviously we select a lot of Chase Brown and he goes right after us. So always stings to lose him. But I think that was the prudent thing to do, especially because we're already kind of seeing some weird things in these rooms. I don't really want to make any assumptions about these quarterbacks coming back, because I looked at the queue. I said, look at all these stacking options. And then it went Caleb, Trevor, Lawrence back to back.
Yeah, losing Lawrence there, definitely too bad. Losing Jerry Jeudy at the turn is a little bit disappointing. It's interesting to put him and Njoku together, I think, and potentially gives you that late round Cincinnati play for the week 16. We don't really have too much with the Dolphins that would work there other than the late running back, which is always fun.
Yep. So yeah, we got a 1-2-5-2 build. We can, Jared Goff is the top of the ranks. If we did want to grab our second quarterback, we also have, I guess no other. Well, we have Stafford and Watson as potential outs. This is also a little running back sweet spot here. How do you think we navigate this pick?
Yeah, I tend to like going with Charbonnet here when there isn't another clear option. And that gives us, I don't think this isn't the team I'm writing about. I don't think it is nearly as strong as the Dolphins play last year, but a huge chunk of my teams do have one of the two Seahawks backs.
Yeah.
I think that there's a chance that Walker ends up being, kind of that next guy to jump into, say, that Saquon Barkley type of tier. There's also a chance that he, does so much east-west running that it becomes Charbonnet and that he crushes, or that Walker hurts and he crushes. I think that Seahawks offense is going to put up a ton of points, and I think it'll be well balanced. I mean, you think of a team like the Detroit Lions last season, even though I don't think the scheme is going to be the same, I think the tactical objectives are going to be similar. And you're going to have a lot of touchdowns for Geno Smith. He's going to be a value. It's going to be spread probably across those receivers. But then, you look at the scoring last year for Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think that we can play that this year with the Seahawks at, more affordable prices.
Yeah. I love playing it through both of those guys as well, getting way more Charbonnet than I do Walker, just because a lot of times you are having to decide on one of those wide receivers, a Brian Thomas, a JSN, or Kenneth Walker. And it's a little easier to break the ties in favor of those wide receivers, knowing that Charbonnet is here. But yeah, Charbonnet, I also think, a great pairing with, we have so much early season production with CMC and James Conner starting to take some really big swings, even if it is more contingent with Zach Charbonnet, I think makes sense with this room. Also, again, too, not that we would necessarily do a Geno Charbonnet stack. I don't think that would be like the worst break glass in case of emergency stack here. And sets us up well to have a decent amount of flexibility here. Looking at some of the
especially
other
when you have Keenan Allen on the other side of that.
True. Yes. Getting that week 17 game. And I know that's one I feel like you probably are ending up with a lot of, right? Just kind of with your rankings on Keenan, on these Seahawks. And I know are you slightly higher than the market on Caleb Williams as well?
I am. And it's very much a scenario based play with him. He doesn't scramble. When you look at the scramble rates for the different guys, it concerns you in terms of what his hybrid upside is. And if you lose some of the hybrid viability scoring wise, then the rookie QB has to do, what Stroud has to do. The flip side of that is that he's been very good on designed runs, and he's freakishly athletic when he does carry. I would like to think that Chicago is going to incorporate some of that, which would then balance out his lack of scrambles and, give you that boost. And then he doesn't have to be as good. The receivers are there. I think Caleb Williams is very possibly the tournament winner, especially if you have your roster built to where you can withstand, the first 5-6 weeks.
Was it, I think I was listening to Stealing Bananas with you and Ben. I don't know if it was you or Ben who said, like, if you could know one thing this year, like one stat, that like Caleb Williams' designed rush rate would be it, like knowing if he has a little bit of that rushing juice, it could really be a smashing the ADP spot.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons DeAndre Swift is somebody I do have a lot of, but when you talk about passing on him today for a different player, I guess I'm almost a little bit concerned that he doesn't have his backups gapped that much from a talent perspective, but also that they could have a pretty high design run rate for Caleb Williams. And then you're actually starting to look at Swift having a pretty narrow path, even though his price is very favorable.
Yeah. What do you think of this question, Shawn? Is it too much to draft 3 to 4 Bears with a rookie quarterback like Caleb?
I'm probably thinking about that from sort of a scenario-based perspective where I wouldn't do it that often. But I've kind of gotten to where I like the individual prices on most of the Bears. I mean, DJ Moore is the one that's hard. I mean, he's almost certainly overvalued, which doesn't mean he couldn't actually still be the guy you needed. Being overvalued doesn't eliminate you from hitting your high-end outcome and being the winner. But I do think that, Cole Kmet too is somebody who, I mean, definitely, and I actually draft Cole Kmet every once in a while when he's a huge ADP value, even with 2 elite tight ends. Certainly if you didn't get the second one, he would be a target. And I think especially a target on a Bears heavy team where you're making that bet that the Bears are awesome, that they're this year's version of the Houston Texans. And maybe, with even additional dynamism from Caleb Williams in certain ways. Matching what Stroud did as a passer will be virtually impossible.
We're on the clock. Jared Goff does go. You got a bunch of running backs here. Josh Downs is an ADP faller, which never seems to happen. Ricky Pearsall also is a stack. How do you think we play this?
I would probably go running back here if there's a running back that you like, and let the receivers continue to fall. I know that you're big on the Ray Davis pick there, but we get Jalen Wright, which is definitely my preference when we have it set like this. You kind of move to him as the fourth player in my rankings, but I believe he was the ADP value. Is that correct?
I believe so. Let me see where we got him. I mean, not ADP value. I mean, we took
but
him
relative to the other guys.
Relative to the others, yeah. Yeah.
He's the best contingent play for this team.
That was my thought. It was like, okay, we have a pretty good running back room. What is the biggest cut possible? We also have Njoku week 17. We have the Niners in week 16. Jalen Wright is that kind of guy that could supercharge a team that already has CMC and James Conner on it. I do want to get your take on Josh Downs. You also said some interesting stuff about him on a recent pod, but we are back up here. Do we keep eschewing wide receiver here for a running back, or how do you think we play this?
Yeah, I would probably take McLaughlin here.
Okay.
But, if you want to build a really crazy team, I would throw TJ Hawkinson out there for you.
I mean, I feel like we already are building a crazy team. So let's do McLaughlin. Talk about, because a lot of people will say, all right, you got 5 wide receivers. Josh Downs, potential second-year breakout, pretty good last year. Falls 10 picks past ADP. Why not take Josh Downs as your wide receiver 6 there?
Well, I think that Adonai Mitchell is going to be something of a sensation. Now, probably not from a scoring perspective, which is what we mostly care about in fantasy, but he's going to be dynamic. He's extremely athletic. The same basic thesis that we're betting on with Brian Thomas, you can get access to with him later, with the exception of, what the passing volume is. Michael Pittman, very good, but undervalued. I think this offense is going to be Richardson and Jonathan Taylor running the ball. Josh Downs, I think, is the one guy who I think is awesome in reality and is almost undraftable in fantasy football. I would throw out, and I think it's labeled such that, hopefully it's pretty clicky, but our ceiling bananas from last week, we made the case that Richardson is going to almost be sort of this reverse Konami code player for teams this year, which, again, not saying that you need to believe that. I made the Pete, I will occasionally do. I made a rushing prediction for him that would absolutely destroy every other quarterback who has ever played. And if he hits that, obviously in fantasy football, he's going to be good. I think there are potential issues for his receivers.
Yeah. And so then it seems like your thesis would maybe be the passing volume might not be there for the overall offense. He's going to get squeezed from a target perspective because Michael Pittman will get his targets there. And then he's going to get squeezed as a downfield threat because AD Mitchell is a pretty compelling figure there. And so he's almost just getting squeezed in every direction, where you would, if his profile was in a different spot, you would be, potentially way more excited about him.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can make the case that his rookie season is not really that different than, Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison. And if that is the case, and those guys are undervalued. And so if you're saying those guys are undervalued where they are, then it's sort of ridiculous to pass on Josh Downs. But I do think you have to be aware of and respect what the offensive scheme is. He's also not a good fit for what Richardson does well. You look at some of the games Richardson had last year. I mean, he had a game where I think he was 11 for 25 and threw for 200 yards. Well, that game probably, again, benefits Mitchell more than the underneath guy. But Josh Downs is good enough that if they use him differently than I expect and the offense really blows up, he's going to be... I like to play those Colts guys in like a Josh Downs. And maybe this would have been a team to do that. But if you have Malik Neighbors early, if you think that your quarterback out is Daniel Jones late, then I like Josh Downs as actually being draftable. Certainly I like AD Mitchell in those situations.
And that thought kind of dovetails what I was talking about. Let's actually make this pick here. We got some running backs still here. Broncos wide receivers, I think, could certainly make sense on this team. What do you think?
Yeah, this is where I usually pivot back to the Broncos receivers. It doesn't really seem like there's a need to take Deshaun Watson. People often try to make us pick him in round 18.
Yes. Yeah, we will. We always like to let the room force us to take him. I do select Troy Franklin there. He was the highest wide receiver in your ranks. But yeah, I like how you talked about that. I definitely am maybe more open to downs than you, but I love the idea. And what I said on the show, people were asking me, are you thinking about correlation for the playoffs early in the draft? And I'm saying, I want to be thinking about it more for the non-superstar players, the guys going in the triple digits, where it's like, how does Josh Downs hit for me? It's probably because he gets in an insane game environment against the Giants in week 17. Like, he's the kind of player who would benefit from catch a bomb, speed up the game. That's how he hits. And so thinking through correlation more for those later players, I do think is the way to do it. I do just also want to be like, man, if he's just good, what if he surpasses Michael Pittman? What if he just earns targets at that kind of clip where, he generates his own production essentially and not necessarily worrying about some of the other macro things. Would you want to double tap the Broncos wide receivers here? Or do you see something else?
I like going with both of them if that's the direction that you are leaning. They're both such good contingent plays at this part of the draft. And it's interesting because at one point it seemed to me, and you probably can correct this if it is just definitely not true, but that Mims was making a push and they were going to flip. And then for whatever reason, Franklin has pushed out ahead again.
Yeah, no, it did seem like that. Their ADPs have been pretty tightly connected. And I'm with you. Like, I'll take them as one-offs, obviously, but my preference would be to have both of them on the same team. I think your chance of, basically paying, for a single here and then getting to hit a triple with one of them is like pretty high. And most people I talk to, and I'm actually curious if you have a strong preference on one or the other. In this draft, I just been defaulting to play ADP wise. It's more likely that if you take Franklin, who goes 9 picks earlier, that you're going to be able to get Mims than vice versa. I personally don't have a super strong preference. I think I maybe lean Franklin of just being like, man, Mims had, some opportunities. What if Peyton just doesn't like him? There's so much to like about Franklin, but I do love thinking through, like, if this Broncos offense works as Sean Payton is envisioning it, like, one of these guys is going to hit in a pretty big way. And I don't even think it burns you if one of them is a massive hit and the other is kind of a bust or just so-so. Like, I think if you're getting the league winner with the cost of a 14th and 15th round pick, you're going to be pretty happy with that.
Now, they do have some other names in there who could be, a little bit of a thorn in your side in terms of even just getting the routes. But again, if the offense works, then, these guys are almost as a floor going to be second and third in routes, and then how those routes are designed to, get the ball out and get the ball to the receivers. One of the things you mentioned there would be, like, if one guy hits, but then the other guy still has the weekly upside. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Franklin is the easy wide receiver one in that group. We know that Bo Nix has that comfort level with him. The design is going to be different. Can they execute a different design at the NFL level against NFL players? That's certainly a completely different question. But when you have that rapport, the chances for him to be the wide receiver one, especially when Courtland Sutton is a good, not great player, is very real. But then if that happens, Marvin Mims could still be a guy who has, 6 touchdowns, 3 of them of the long variety. Those additional games can be very valuable to you at these prices.
Yeah. And that is the fun thing to think through, right? Like, there are scenarios where the offense kind of disappoints, but someone has to catch balls in garbage time. And, that could easily be Troy Franklin giving us a pretty strong rookie year, even in a so-so environment. But the scenarios where Bo Nix surprises everyone, at least relative to where people are taking him in fantasy drafts. Then there are potential for multiple wins in this offense. And whether that's Cortland Sutton, Mims, I know the chat highlighting Josh Reynolds, Tim Patrick still kicking around. But yeah, it is fun to think through those scenarios. And we're obviously building out a big bet on Denver now with 3 straight Broncos, McLaughlin, Franklin, Mims. Do somewhat wish we could have that Chase Brown pick back now opposite that week 17, see if we could push Brock. But I still think we played that correctly because we could have been in a little bit of a tougher spot quarterback wise if we got sniped on him. We do see a bit of a running back or quarterback run here. Geno, Will Levis, Aaron Rodgers, Drake May, and Daniel Jones. Obviously, Nix makes sense for this team. Watson is by far the top ADP value and also a stacking value for us. This could also be a 3 quarterback team too. I don't think that is out of the question. How do you think we play this?
I like to get Watson in round 18 or not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm open to him there. I do think that it can be a 3. I mean, it probably ideally would be a 3 QB team as long as you like all of the quarterbacks. Do you have a preference here? I would prefer to go in the direction that you want on this pick, probably.
I'm fine at this point. I do think it's a 3 quarterback team. I feel like Brock and Nix is maybe a little weak. And then if you miss out on Watson, I don't know where we're necessarily manufacturing that last stack. Like even with the running backs, Geno's gone, Tua's gone, Stafford's gone for Cup. So I think that is the best way for us to kind of make this team, make sense. And now we're at a 2-5-7-2 build. Brock, Watson, CMC, Connor, Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, Jaleel McLaughlin at running back, Debo, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Brian Thomas, Jameson Williams, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, Dalton Kincaid, and David Njoku. I think this helps us build the strongest possible team.
Yeah, I really like how this one is set up. And it is something where that Njoku pick allows you to stick with the 2 tight ends if you want. And that frees up a roster spot. The running back selections, I think that McLaughlin is a good enough 5 that you're allowed. You can sit there, obviously, with the 5 running backs, especially with CMC. So we probably have a quarterback and then 1 best player available pick. And yeah, as you noted there, I mean, we can't risk Nix.
Yeah, I don't think we can risk it. If there was an extreme value that made sense for this team, but let's get Nix in, and that allows us to complete these 3 different stacks here. We add Bo Nix as our QB3. So we got Brock stacked up with CMC and Debo. With the Jameson Williams bring back, we have Watson stacked up with David Njoku with the Jalen Wright bring back. And then we have a Denver onslaught here with Bo Nix, McLaughlin, and the 2 wide receivers. I didn't get to talk to you about the McLaughlin pick. It's been an interesting one because Javonte has the highest ADP. Audric Estime continues to get some buzz. Sean Payton talking about his size, how he could see him as, his early down rusher. Where does McLaughlin fit into this picture for you?
Well, there's been so much talk about him being the first guy at the facility. One of the things, he's like the all-time collegiate rushing champion. Obviously, a lot of that took place at lower levels, but you still have to be just, unbelievably productive to do that. One of the things that's sort of looking through the Denver history is you have, Pierre Thomas having a similar sort of undrafted rookie season and then jumping to the RB1. I think a lot of stuff that Ben has said on Stealing Bananas about how the McLaughlin play is a little bit thin and Javonte Williams is set for, a heroic season is true. And at the same time, kind of looking back at similarly priced backfields, I mean, this is kind of a small gap sort of situation where historically, and you look at some of the teams like the 49ers and the Patriots, where there was a ton of total RB points available and you didn't know going in, the second or third guy has almost always been the guy. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be again, but we have that dynamic that has played out across other teams as well. I think that the only way that McLaughlin gets stepped on is actually if Blake Watson is awesome, which I do think is very possible, right? And so you want to be aware of that. And yet, I mean, I've kind of moved in the direction of thinking that McLaughlin is the best package of upside and price of the guys right now.
Yeah. We are on the clock, Shawn. Final pick here. Our guy Devontae Walker, who's been going earlier, he falls all the way here. There's certainly some correlation stuff you could do. Your Khalif Raymonds, your Cleveland receivers, your Josh Reynolds. What do you think the play is here?
Yeah, I would probably go with Tolbert or like out of nowhere sort of Yoshivas.
Okay, hang on. I've been trying to get more of him. You said it. I'm going to get him in the queue right away. All right. We put Yoshivas in. We were going to leave this team without a Denver bring back. There's been obviously some positive buzz about Yoshivas and Chase Brown in tandem from the team there. Talk a little bit about him. Obviously, he makes sense from a correlation angle. But do you think he could beat out Jermaine Burton as the wide receiver 3 there?
I think that he could. I think that we're probably a little bit excited about Burton from the perspective of he is this deep ball guy. They have a role there for him where obviously when you're having to scheme for Chase and Higgins, the defense won't be able to give him the type of attention that other similarly dynamic receivers often get. And yet that can be a little bit more of a year 2 element, especially where he was drafted. And especially when his ability to draw targets, even in college, was thinner than I think maybe people are completely aware of. And then you go to the guy who maybe was in that situation last year, did some things at the end of the season, is also extremely athletic and big, right? And could be, I mean, he could be the guy who is the Higgins eventual replacement, not Burton. And so if you have an injury or you have him taking the next step, you know, sometimes we get so excited for the rookies that we miss the guy who's ready to take the year 2 leap. And I think that Yoshivas actually has a better overall profile, a better physicality than maybe people give him credit for, because obviously small school, some of those types of things. I mean, I think it takes a lot of guts to click that. And yet it's a very fun play when it makes sense like it does here. I think you want to at least consider it.
Yeah, I think it was a fun click here. I'm going to recap this team. We're going to bring Pat Kerrane on for a third draft here in a second. As Starkindler says, we got 650 people watching. Hit the likes, subscribe. If you guys are audio listeners, we stream these on my YouTube channel. You can find that at Peter Overzet on YouTube, Overzet. I don't think I've ever spelled it for the audio listeners. What a treat I am giving out today. And yes, and if you're watching this and you haven't been able to catch the whole thing, or you would like to get it in audio form, it does post on the RotoViz network. There is a specific Best Ball Banana Stand Best Ball feed. You can get the audio there, as well as all of the other great RotoViz podcasts. You heard me reference Stealing Bananas with Shawn and Ben Gretsch. So much great stuff with Colum and the team over there doing all kinds of fantasy content. So make sure you guys get subscribed there. Shawn, I'm going to do a quick final recap of this team, get your final thoughts, and then we'll bring Pat Kerrane on. 3-5-8-2 build here. Brock Purdy, Deshaun Watson, and Bo Nix. Our 5 running backs, CMC, James Conner, Zach Charbonnet, Jalen Wright, and Jaleel McLaughlin. Our wide receivers, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp, Keenan Allen, Brian Thomas, Jameson Williams, Troy Franklin, Marvin Mims, and Andre Yoshivas. And our 2 tight ends, Dalton Kincaid and David Njoku. Shawn, it felt like it was maybe a little bumpy once we hit the double-digit rounds, but I really like how we landed the plane here.
Yeah, this was such a fun team, such a fun draft. We got so much volume, those early receivers. We have so much dynamism and vertical ability with the later receivers. I love that complementary element to the wide receiver group. I think running back and tight end should score a ton of points, and then you're just looking for those QBs to hit in the right weeks to balance it out and win the tournament. I'm going to be keeping this one in the back of my mind when Yoshivas goes off and thinking, where are we going to end up with this one?
That's right. There it is. There it is. We did get to line up all of those fun Week 17 stacks here. Shawn, appreciate you as always. Always a blast drafting. We will see you guys next Monday. If you guys want to be drafting off of the ranks that you saw today, you can subscribe over at RotoViz. Get Shawn's ranks, Blair's ranks. They got ranks for all kinds of different formats. I was actually referencing the dynasty ranks over the weekend. I submitted or clicked yes on accepting a trade that netted me Mark Andrews when I saw where he was in Shawn's dynasty rank. So take advantage of all of that good stuff. Shawn, we'll see you next time on the Best Ball Banana Stand. Up next, Pat Kerrane.
Scuba Kerrane, Patty Millions, Peacock Pat Kerrane on the 1s and 2s.
Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
98 yards to the fucking house against Carolina in week 10.
Pat, first 4th of July as a father? Did you shoot off some Roman candles to impress the ladies in your life?
No, I didn't. We went and watched the fireworks though. That was fun. And yeah, it was overall very, very fun little weekends. Had some friends visit. My mom's in town. So yeah, it's been nice. How about you?
Good stuff. Yeah, similar. We went over to the beach on the 4th of July. That was nice. April's now like, she'll just camp out at the beach for like an hour, organize seashells, dig holes in the sand and all of that good stuff. So I love it. Cause I was like, now we can go. I like read my book for 30 minutes while she was just chilling. It was a good time.
Yeah. She's entertaining herself on her playmat. Like she likes to kick her legs and like, there's like cards for her to look at, and there's like little things that hang that jingle, and I'm like, this baby entertaining herself is magical. Like,
yes,
I'm not taking this for granted.
The phrase that Lauren and I toss around. I also love the top of the show has just been you and me catching up on dad stuff. Lauren and I are always like, she's really good at independent play. That's a phrase you'll start saying as you but yeah, being able to independently play comes in very clutch when you're trying to juggle a bunch of stuff here. How has your drafting been going? Have you finished your pit bulls, your fast drafts, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I actually just threw the pit bulls in. It was such a busy weekend. I threw them in as slows. As the puppies are finishing up, I'm still in like 100 and let me see. I'm on the clock in. I'm on the clock in 24 drafts right now. And then I have another 89 drafts that I'm not on the clock, but are active. Wow. So yeah, I mean, that's way down from, so that's only 113. I mean, it's basically nothing.
That is like, and it's so funny because I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I'm in like 15 puppy 2 slows that are wrapping up and they're close to finishing. I'm like excited to get these slow drafts off my plate. And you're still very much going to be in the thick of it for a long time.
Yeah. It's when I'm up above in that 150 to 200 range, it's a little too much. I like that they came out with the option of the 15-second clock I didn't use it on the bulldog or the pit bull or whatever, but the next puppy, I think I'm going to like try to crank out at least 50 fasts and then get the rest in as slows. Cause 100 slows is not a problem, but yeah, doing 150 puppies all at once it gets a little much. There's a couple times where I slept in a little bit and I woke up to like 3 minutes on the clock. I was like, hope this is the only one that was close. I didn't sleep through 10 picks. So,
all right. Pat, I hopped us in Best Ball Mania. We got the 1-5 chalk start so far. Jefferson, Amon Ra here. Who do you like?
Jefferson, come on down. Jefferson
went at 101 in my draft previous to this. We'll start with Justin Jefferson here. Had a question in the chat from James. Where can I get the ship chasing shirt that Pat is wearing? Over in the merch store, we got all kinds of ship chasing stuff. A lot of it right now are bits from ADP chasing, 4% exposure blanket, 1% exposure towel. But if you scroll down, we even have chasing Kerrane stuff. If you scroll down, you can get the regular ship chasing shirt though.
Yeah, I was, kind of like going through the closet. What am I going to wear this morning? And it did cross my mind that I convinced Pete to add a 4% exposure blanket and a 1% exposure towel, which haven't done numbers, let's say. So,
you know what? Our guy Tyler, Emo Cowboy, he ended up buying both the towel and the blanket over the weekend. So we sold a couple here. Let's see. And by the way, yes, we do have ADP chasing back today. Pat, Davis, and Sam Sherman. And I believe your guys' topic today, you've done the looking for this year's Kerrane, looking for this year's Puka. Today, trying to find this year's Trey McBride, the late round tight end hit.
Yeah, I campaigned really hard for this year's quarterback. I don't think we've talked about the late round quarterback, especially the rookies, very much at all on that show. So, but we just decided to go with tight ends.
Yeah. Every show is Drake May hour with Kerrane. So yes, I know Davis was pushing for that, and I saw Sam pushed back. He's like, let's just do the tight ends, man. Like,
yeah, I guess he knew, and I knew too. Like, I was like, yeah, you're just gonna, the whole show's just gonna be Drake May and Bo Nix if we don't.
Well, the reason is because on the surface, it's not that fun, right? Like, there's not a lot of late tight end profiles to get excited about. It feels more like a chore looking for it, at least with like the running backs and everything. It's like, oh, there's all these names. With the tight ends, you're like, what? I got to get excited about Jelani Woods?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I think the tight ends will be kind of fun to go through because there's, you know, especially like in this environment, one of the edges I think could be 3 tight end. You know, because we have more luxury picks than we're used to. Where like we've the last couple of weeks have been like, I think we're good at running back, but then you can take extra running backs, but you don't have to. And maybe one of the things to do is like on builds that you wouldn't have taken a 3rd tight end on before, you do. It can be difficult.
We're on the clock here, Pat. Slight ADP value on Jonathan Taylor. Oh, I need to upload your ranks here. I'll do that after this pick. Waddle. Let's grab Jalen Waddle here with Jefferson, and I'll just do this live on the air. Pat, tell the people about the legendary upside ranks. I have the CSV on my desktop right now, so I'm going to upload this, but let them know where they can get this.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. We got ranks updated daily, covering Underdog, DraftKings, and FFPC. Working still on the drafters ones. Do plan to add those as well. But yeah, we got the rankings are somewhat tied to ADP in the sense that like a player can't like rocket way up above ADP. But you'll also see, you know, you'll get your guys as well.
I was tilting because Scott Fishbowl draft kicks off today, a fun annual charity pro-am that is now turned into such a behemoth from an organizational standpoint for Scott. But now you can do your drafts in MFL and Sleeper. I somehow got defaulted into Sleeper. You can't upload ranks to Sleeper.
Oh my God.
And they have like weird default ADP. It's not like the Underdog where it's like, no, you're fine. Like the ADP is good. And I'm like, holy cow. I'm going to use the Josh ADHD tool to look at like the ADP and stuff. But not being able to upload ranks is a big pain in the ass.
Yeah, I don't think the bar was especially high, but they didn't clear it. I prefer MFL.
Yeah. Barkley ADP value, Diggs, Kerrane, Zay, Tank. What do you think?
I'm not. Barkley's fine. We could take him if you want. What do you think?
I don't mind pushing it. It means we're probably going to get some better ADP values. You want to do Diggs?
Let's do Zay.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, I did in my first draft this morning. I got a Derrick Henry share, like 9 picks past ADP. That was enough for me to pull the trigger there. I have been doing Barkley in the mid-3rd when I get him, but like you're never going to get me to be like, no, let's not take a wide receiver here.
Yeah, I mean, Barkley in the 3rd is fine, especially since he doesn't go in the 3rd very much. Like if you went in the 3rd regularly, I'd be like, let's take a receiver. But at some point you do want to get the guy in the 3rd that everyone else is taking in the 2nd. But in this room, you know, I'm always a little nervous about that.
Yeah, we do have some friends and family. I do tip people off in the Discord. If you guys are YouTube members, there's the Best Ball Value Hounds tier that gets you access to the Best Ball After Dark shows. Those are premium shows just for the YouTube members. And there's also a channel that you unlock with your YouTube membership. You sync up your Discord membership in the Deposit Kingdom Discord. That's also where the Ship Chasing Discord is. And then that will get you alerts in that channel when I hop in these drafts. So if you're wanting to get into stream draft, I saw some questions about that. That's how you do that. Yeah, I think the Barkley thing to me too is like, I do think he is going to get more expensive. Like, I think he's going to be like where Jonathan Taylor is for a lot of August. Like, I just have a hard time seeing the casuals not wanting him. And I also have seen him when a casual is at the turn. Like, I've seen them do JT Barkley, like double tap, take Barkley at the turn. So to me, that's kind of the canary in the coal mine of like, I'm not going to select him ever in the 2nd. So let me just grab him in the mid-3rd during this window right now.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I still didn't want to do it though.
No, and then it gets to the whole thing, right? Because you have to talk through ADP value and rankings value. And if a guy is still not ahead in your ranks, despite being at ADP value, that it doesn't really matter.
Yep.
Okay, we are about to pick here at 4-4. Or 4-8. I kind of have an idea what you're probably setting up. Which way do we play this?
I mean, I think the more prudent thing is to take Lamar because we have a stack set up. And do we want Lamar double stacked without Lamar? Probably not. And does Lamar come all the way back to the 5th? He might. You got Allen for cover. You got Mahomes for cover, or did he go?
Mahomes went.
Yeah, so I think we take
No,
Lamar
he
then.
didn't. Sorry.
Oh.
Richardson went.
Well, that's weird.
Yeah, I grab Lamar. I think you're right there. And I also, I would need to check it. I think I have a ton of Lamar stacked with Andrews. Very little Lamar stacked with Zay, I'm guessing, just based on kind of the ADP dynamics.
Right. Yeah, me too. And I don't do this a ton, but I do like the idea. Jacob Sanderson kind of got me onto this idea of going through wide receivers with Zay a little earlier than ADP, and then you have the potential for the Lamar double. It was easier before because Andrews used to go way later.
Yeah.
He tends not to make it back here, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I think this was the spot to do it. Like in my draft this morning, like McBride went early. It's only Laporta and Kelsey were off the board, and like you said, like having Lamar with just Zay, like you want. We think through like some of the upside scenarios for a lot of these guys, talking about Gibbs, and Andrews does go there. A lot of the bull cases involve contingent upside. Like I think you could pretty much tell yourself a story of Zay even getting a boost in target share without Andrews in a way that could make him just an absolute smash if that played out that way.
Agreed.
And then McBride falls all the way back to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that seems like a fun way to play. Obviously, the double stack's nice. No one's going to turn their nose up at a double stack, but I have no problem with how this ran out.
I mean, as far as like winning the whole thing goes, Lamar flows through Zay, and then Andrews flops and McBride is the guy you need.
Right.
Like, that's both plausible and would put us in an insane situation. Like we're already where it's like, okay, one more huge score and we're like at the top, competing at the top. I mean,
I think that's the best way to think about it. Like I think about that dynamic a lot with I don't love taking like Tyreek, Waddle, Achane all together, even Tyreek, Waddle, where I'm like, hitting on that probably is good for your advance rates, right? Where like the Dolphins are awesome again and they're ping ponging in big games and like you probably advance more teams. But I don't love that team showing up in week 17 and having my 3 highest investment picks or even 2 all on the same team there. I'd rather have I get the alpha game from Malik Neighbors and the alpha game from Tyreek, or I get the alpha game from Waddle and the alpha game from Jamar Chase. Like in my mind, that's how I would ideally draw it up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you can, you need an alpha game from one of the two. And in a sense, you're betting so clearly on the Dolphins, and hopefully with that, you've got Tua. So you've got your quarterback hitting with a really nice score at a cheap price, plus a true alpha game. And then I think you can get, even though it's your second round pick, like if you get like a 19 from Waddle or something, 18, it's going to hit your lineup. So I think from that perspective, it's okay. But yeah, I mean, I agree. Like you're going to need like a few huge scores, and to like feel like, well, it's probably not from my second round pick is not the best feeling.
Yeah. Andrew says, Pete, I'm late. Did you see the Achane steam from the Miami beat reporter? Yeah. Not only did I see the steam, but in today's new Fantasy Life newsletter, I led with it here. So yes, I saw the steam there. Let's see if I can find where they now the new look. I don't know where the newsletter is, but yes, I wrote about that today. Did you see that quote from the Miami beat about him, Pat?
Yeah, Drico sent it to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, I mean, I'm at 21%. Achane, he's my 3rd highest drafted running back, 5th highest drafted player overall. And it did leave me feeling like I've been sleeping on him.
Yeah, for people who missed it, definitely check out the Fantasy Life newsletter. I linked to it here. I'll drop it in the chat as well. But it's, this beat here who's just absolutely gushing over how he's looked in practice. I will come back here. Pat, I've been trying to get some more Rashee Rice right now. Anything else you like here?
Rashee Rice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do feel like he's gonna. I heard Levitan say he didn't feel like much had changed, and wasn't as in on the rise. But I think one thing that's changed is people aren't fully panicking. Like people were panicked, truly panicked about a month ago, and I think it was just in some ways just people kind of calming down. And then I do think there's been some updates of like, when is the trial again?
Yeah.
And if the trial's late enough, then we're talking about a very different outlook for 2024.
And I went through this, and I mentioned the Jonathan Brooks thing in the first show or first draft this morning. But in my new Deposit Kingdom video, going through mispriced players, Rashee Rice was one of the poster boys. I went through a lot of stuff. Hayden Winks had done some digging into the legal stuff. One of the civil trials is set. That's not even till December, but the criminal case doesn't even have a trial date. It seems like not only is it possible that nothing even happens this year, similar to what happened with the Kamara situation a couple years back. A lot of the odds, when I added up even Hayden's odd, it's there's an 80% chance it's 6 games or less this year. And that doesn't even account for the scenarios where it doesn't happen. So man, it's starting to really stand out to me as an opportunity you just want to hammer right now. Pat, we're on the clock here. Looks like we're in the running back zone at this point. By ADP, you're looking at Montgomery. Anything else you like? Ramondre?
Either of those guys are fine. I would say probably Montgomery would be where I would lean.
Yeah. Neither of those guys seem to fall that much these days. I never see Montgomery 10 picks past ADP, so I tend to click him when he's there at ADP.
I tend to as well, and I don't love Montgomery, but the contingent value with him is pretty real. If Gibbs were to miss time, Montgomery would be a smash. So he's not my favorite archetype, but if you're getting him in the 7th, especially because he doesn't tend to fall as much, I try to get some exposure to him.
Yep. Yeah, Brooks and Rice, no matter what. Check out that video. I have it pinned in the chat. You guys can go to the Deposit Kingdom channel. Also dig into a lot of the other injured guys that aren't as clean of bets as Jonathan Brooks and Rashee Rice, getting into the TJ Hawkinsons, the Nick Chubbs, some of those guys who are discounted because of pretty severe injuries. And you kind of have to handle those on a case-by-case and team basis. Also talk about Justin Fields in that one, because he's another one who obviously is going to offer very little in the form of early season production. Even the late season production could be in question. So I think those are interesting guys to think through, specifically for these top heavy tournaments where we're trying to, eke out any possible kind of edge or value we can. And those are some of the last remaining, mispriced players, I would say, Pat.
Yeah, I agree. And Evan Porce had some really positive stuff on Jonathan Brooks over the weekend. So, I mean, he's one I've been kind of is he going to rise? Is he going to fall? I'm sort of terrified he'll rise. But then I've been taking a lot of them, and then it's am I getting a bad price? So I'm at 17% on Brooks. I'd like to be more in the 20s, but I don't know. I mean, he's going to start training camp on PUP, and I think he'll fall at that point. And then I'm going to start hammering him from that point forward.
Yeah, we did too much talking about him. He goes at 89. I was at 20%. He's gotten a little more popular. I'm only at 16 now. Some good running back options here, though. Zach Moss, James Conner. I'm down for either of those two. No correlation with either.
No, we have McBride.
Oh, yeah. Yes, good call. Sorry, I was just looking at Oppo correlation there. Let's do Conner. Drafted James Conner with Shawn on the draft previously. I was mentioning too, I've been hearing people get a little bit more and more excited about Conner, both because he's just going to project well, and also because the beats have been kind of saying Trey Benson isn't, going to wrestle away much from him.
Yeah, he was my pick a couple weeks ago for riser on ADP chasing, because I think that drumbeat is going to keep going of Conner's the RB1. It doesn't mean he's necessarily a great pick if he rockets up into the 6th, 7th round range, right. But I think he probably gets there, partly because all running backs move up. at some point. But yeah, I think he probably goes. Like I could see him going in the 6th round by the end of draft season.
Yeah. He's definitely going to be one of those where the projections, and I think then, the projections flow into the ranks, which is going to flow into the ADP.
Right.
All of that makes sense. I think he's probably like Cap, like he's not going to be able to rise. He's never going to jump like Joe Mixon kind
probably
of thing.
Not. Yeah, probably not. But I think he'd be kind of in that range.
Mostert, another little correlation piece with Waddle, get that 3rd running back. Wide receiver's pretty gross. Anything else you see?
No, I like it.
I do really like the running back wide receiver pairings, having the Connor McBride, having the Mostert, Waddle. That seems like the more ideal version of the dynamic we were talking about at the top of the show, where you're not spending the early premium pick on both. And then you're also getting that ping-ponging dynamic where Mostert gets 2 TDs in week 16 and Waddle goes off in week 17.
Also, it doesn't always necessarily have to ping pong because of the this is something that Sacrilegious touched on in one of his articles recently. It's like a lot of what we're doing with correlation is we're betting on these teams to be projected higher than in late December than we would project them now. So like if they're projected to score an additional touchdown, that is good for everyone on the team. And if they do end up being a high-powered offense over the course of the season, such that they would be projected for that additional touchdown, right? Both players probably scored more touchdowns than we thought they would, scored more fantasy points than we thought they would. So you get that benefit of us just being like incorrect with the projections. And the way that you do bet against the projections to some extent in DFS, right? Like that's why we still use correlation and stuff, but it's like the projections we trust way more than we do right now. Like how these guys are projected for week 17 is not very accurate. So you get that part of it baked into it where, the other thing is they could just hit together. There's a week that always sticks in my mind where CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott both went off and the Cowboys just pummeled the Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this was in like 2021.
Yeah.
And it's like, especially if you're getting both very cheaply, the running back and the tight end, especially like a running back and a tight end, like those dudes could easily hit together in best ball in a way that it wouldn't feel as likely for them to do in DFS.
So this is kind of a familiar spot you can get in these drafts where you do get the elite tight end, you get the elite quarterback like we did with Lamar and McBride. We're taking advantage of the sweet spot for the running backs here, and yet we still are only 4 wide receivers through 9 rounds. We're about to pick in the 10th. I think it is kind of a familiar spot here where like the value is probably not at wide receiver, or you feel like you need to get that 5th wide receiver now.
I think we could go 5th wide receiver. I also think Javonte at what are we at 116?
116, 6-pick ADP value.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would take Javonte here.
Yeah. I think Javonte would have been my lean as well. No correlation angles there, but still building out a 0 RB room. And I don't know, man. I'd rather kind of just see what does the room give me at 125, even if that means reaching for, say, one of these rookies we like at 125. I'd almost rather do that than like the 2v2 on Mike Williams and whatever running back we'd take at 125.
Right. I mean, and honestly, like we could be done at running back.
This is kind of what we talked about last week. I mean, I think with Connor and Mostert specifically, you're playing those guys as 4th and 5th round values. We talked about this on another build we did either a week or 2 ago.
I think both the last 2 builds we've been in this position, but I've been struggling like, should I be done at running back? But you spend so little that I think you can take, like I like taking like a flyer in kind of the Chandler range, in addition to a room like this, like to give it a little bit more late season upside. And I don't think there's anything wrong with spending 5 running back spots, like that's not like too many spots. So, but I guess I would just say like our wide receiver 4s were Rasheed Rice, right? So we might want to actually go a little heavier at receiver than it might feel like. And if we wanted to, I think we could.
Yeah. let's make this pick, and then I have one other thought kind of on that idea. Judy, Mike Williams do go. Jerome Ford off the board. Dallas Goedert is a faller. Josh Downs would be a decent wide receiver 5. We also got some of the rookies. What do you think?
I think Downs is pretty nice.
Yeah. So Shawn and I, in a very similar spot, passed on Downs, 10 picks past ADP as our, I think, wide receiver 5. Might have been wide receiver 6. But let's hit. People got the bear case on Josh Downs from Shawn. Let's hear the bull case from Pat.
Well, I mean, I understand that there's low pass volume there. You're not necessarily gonna feel like this dude is super exciting, but Josh Downs was like a good prospect. I remember, Anthony Amico being like really high on him very early on in the process, and me being, I was like, I don't know, he's kind of like a small slot receiver. But when you look at like the stuff we care about that's actually predictive, he was a 3-year prospect who was very productive, and then he came in. His overall season-long numbers aren't great. 1.6 yards per out run is like good. It's not. It's like fine. It for a rookie. You're like, okay, let's see. There might be some potential here. But he dealt with an injury down the stretch that really hampered him. And he had this stretch where, like, right in the walkthrough every week, I was like, I think this guy might be becoming the Colts wide receiver 1. Mm-hmm. He had this really impressive stretch. He went yards per out run of 4.22. He had 5 yards per hour in week 7, 1.952, 3.33. He gets banged up, and they call it, he kind of just like a lot of like 0.91 type outings after that. So he flashed as a rookie. Pittman is like not a particularly good wide receiver 1. I'm betting hard against Pittman. A.D. Mitchell's an exciting secondary wide receiver, deep threat. But, I mean, a very boom-bust type of guy. Downs just is like, I just think he can play. It's like he's going to be out there. A.D. Mitchell's competing with Alec Pierce for snaps. He's got the slot role locked down. So it's just a bet on a guy I think I can play, really.
So this is, to me, why it's like we got to take another running back, because it's just like wide receiver is just completely wiped out. I do like Ty Chandler, get another one of those running back wide receiver minis. You like that?
That's how we play it, yeah.
That was going to be my only comment about, like, structurally, I completely agree. Like, if you really wanted to push it, but it's just like the running back is often going to be the best pick at both like 140 and 149. And I think you can get away with, maybe doing wide receiver 1 of those there, but I really feel like you start to water it down, taking that wide receiver over the running back in both those spots.
Yeah. I mean, I think if Pearsall, Polk, Leggett came back, I would have been very, very excited to take that kind of archetype.
Yeah, and we kind of, we took Downs, who has a higher ADP than those guys. Leggett, Polk went a little ahead of ADP, Pearsall a little ahead, so you just don't get the faller there. We should probably think through some of our stack stuff. I guess we have McCarthy late. That's really our only current stack. Might have to think about building that out. Bo Nix with Javonte could make sense.
We got the 14 bye, though.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Jesus, the freaking 14 buys. If you are looking at, I was going to actually bring up Demario Douglas. I thought he would have fit well on this team. We would be looking at Burton, QJ, potentially here. Burton's opposite Javonte in week 17. This is kind of a gross spot.
It's a very, very, very gross spot. We could just do like a Kamani Vidal and just swing for the fences with the running back. I know we don't really need a running back. We could do Komet and just grab a tight end value, but then it limits us on stacking stuff later a little bit.
Yeah.
Is there a quarterback? Not really. Burton? We could do Burton.
Yeah. I threw Burton in there at the last second.
I like that better.
I love that. This is like the opposite case of the Shawn team, where we passed on Downs, didn't really specifically pass on Burton, but took Yoshi Voss.
I saw you guys got Yoshi Voss. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right move. Like, we get the correlation angle, we get another rookie who theoretically has some upside and doesn't make us have to take like 4 straight wide receivers now.
Yeah, I still think we might want to do that though.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, like, we might get like a guy like Vidal to like fall to us here.
Yeah.
And now where like the 2v2, we wouldn't have gotten, Burton to come back.
Yep. No, we wouldn't.
Here's the team for the audio listeners. Lamar at quarterback, up to 5 running backs here. David Montgomery, James Conner, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, and Ty Chandler. We got our 6 wide receivers now. Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, and Jermaine Burton. And our tight end, Trey McBride. So in decent shape there.
I like it.
Chat screaming from Wandale. They want the Danny Dimes backdoor stack. I always feel like I'm getting yelled at here. And Downs dealt with average QB. Pittman about to be a top 12 wide receiver. Okay. All of that good stuff there. All right. Have you done any exposure check-ins recently, Pat? Any guys that surprised you?
No, I've been doing. So yeah, I've been checking in. I'm way flatter than last year in a way that's good because I wasn't probably flat enough last year.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been using the sidekick and that's helped me, I think, get my exposures a little bit in a better place to start. Because it kind of helps. One of the things that it does is helps you break ties a little bit. So, but I still have Jalen Warren at 28%, Rashee Rice at 24%, Javon Baker at 22%, Rico Dowdle 21, Devon Achane 21, Jalen Polk 21, Kelsey and Andrews at 20, Drake May 19, Ladd McConkey at 19. So I've got all those players 19 or higher. I like that I don't. Last year I had like a bunch of dudes at like 21 that I was like, yeah, I like them. Like that's a bigger stand than you need to be making if you just only like them.
For sure. Let's talk a little bit about that in a second. We're on the clock. I put Wandell in the queue. Anything else you see here that you'd like?
I like Wandell. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think we get that correlation there. I was, speaking of kind of diversity stuff, Legendary Upside has this cool tool, the Jacquard tool. Both Pat and Sacrilegious have talked about it. I just uploaded mine. This is for Legendary Upside subs. You just download your CSV. You upload it here. I'm in Chrome and type in your username. And I'm on a pretty diverse track here again this year, 59th percentile and a good amount of diversity across my teams. Will you let people know kind of generally what they're looking at when they see this?
Yeah, so the picks, I always get confused here. We should probably change this to rounds. So it's rounds 1 through 6, rounds 7 through 12, rounds 13 through 18. And so you're seeing Pete's getting less diverse as the draft goes on, which makes sense. ADP means less, and he's basically respecting the ADP less. So yeah, that's good.
Yes.
We'll get back to it.
Well, yeah, let's make this pick here. I do think if we wanted to do Mims, Mims goes. Of course,
I was going to say Mims too. What about Wilson?
Yeah, Wilson with another, just stack up the cards without Kyler.
And Wilson's probably, if he has like a 25-point game, it's probably like week 4 when Rice might still be suspended.
Yes.
So
yeah, that confused me too, the picks, but yeah, the rounds here, and then obviously the positions over here, and you'll see, I think Pat, yours defaults, right? If you go to
I believe so, but I haven't updated it in a couple weeks, but
yeah, there's yours there. So you're at a 39%.
Well, I'm less diverse than you. Yeah.
And I think mine would probably be closer to this if I drafted all of my teams on my own, but almost 50%, maybe even more of mine are drafted with other people. So that's always going to naturally make me more diverse.
And so what percentile am I in if you go down?
You are in the 39th percentile and I was in the 59th percentile.
So I was in the 33rd percentile last year, and ultimately it was like, that's a little too concentrated, especially like in my secondary stands. I felt like we're too concentrated. But to me, like being in the 39th percentile is like pretty great. Like I'm very happy with that. I want to take stands on players. I just want to do it in a way where my teams, and what is this point of this thing? Because it's just telling you one data point about each position, right? It's looking at how diversified your teams are from one another.
Yes.
So to me, it's like a good thing of like, if you're going to be doing a deep dive on your exposures, it's a good way to like point you in the direction of like what you might specifically want to dive further into.
Yes.
It's a good like high level overview where you're like, okay, I'm really not diversified at running back, meaning you're pairing the same running backs like repeatedly. So you might want to then go look at who those guys are and why you're doing that. So yeah, and by the way, that's a perk for Sidekick tier subs.
For the Sidekick.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. This is fine with just mentioning that. Yeah, and that's it, like the example, you know, that say your big stand this year is Lamar Jackson, and that's like your guy. You could still have a really diversified portfolio around that, or a good Jacquard score, because you're stacking him up in different ways. It would be the example of like, you always stack him with Mark Andrews, and it's like,
right,
you could be right about Lamar, but Andrews gets hurt, and then it's like Zay and whoever else, and then you're like, what the hell am I doing?
Exactly. And think about like, as you're building a portfolio, you have like these Lamar Andrews, then you have this Zay Flowers, Lamar, Trey McBride team. That's like a sick team to have in a portfolio that also has a lot of Lamar Andrews. You know, it's diversified from the other stuff while still betting on Lamar.
Do you want to do likely here?
Honestly, I could do Sanat and try to push likely, and we could go 3 tight ends. I'm open to likely though, if you prefer that. Yeah,
I also think I would be interested in did Devontae Walker already go? I'd be very interested in him on this team as well. Geez, Devontae Walker goes at 176 on the one draft where we're trying to build out more. So I'm glad we locked up likely there.
No, we took Sanat.
Or wait, I took what? Did I just click the wrong one?
I guess so. Yeah.
Jesus. I could have sworn I clicked likely. What the hell? I'm gonna have to go back and watch the tape. This feels like where I got rug pulled again. Someone rewind the tape. Did I not click likely?
Hey, there's always an Nelson Aguilar, Pete.
No. We're moving on. We're his team now. We gotta find other correlation.
We need a second quarterback here.
Yeah, I think we're looking at Bo Nix, Daniel Jones, and or both. Unless you're seeing something else. Drake May went at 182, so you can stop looking for him.
Listen, you didn't hear me talk about the Patriots much. Took my Montgomery over Ramondre. I'm trying to do a better job of setting myself up when I have that week 14 bye, to where I don't just go, you know what? Screw it. I don't care.
Yes.
Week 14-0, come on down.
Yes. Joke's going to be on all of you when, as Sus Edwards says, we just got the 2024 Sam Laporta here. All right, so we have 2 more picks. We're at a 1-5-8-2. Like Pat said, we're for sure taking at least one more quarterback, and then we can kind of figure out what we want to do in the last round. Yeah, how do you want to handle that with the bye with Knicks?
I think we take Jones if is he there?
Yes.
Yeah, we take Jones.
Yep. Jones then gives us the stack, gives us, I guess, theoretically, it does get tougher too.
Bring back. Yeah.
What?
Theoretical bring back with Downs.
With Downs. No, but I'm just thinking we had this same spot last week, right? Where we had Jalen Hurts and Drake May. And it's like you get yourself in a spot where it's like, is Drake May playing when the bye you're trying to cover? And same thing with here. Like part of the worry about Daniel Jones is he get benched at the end of the year because the contract, it's like, is he playing at week 14? When Lamar
that's true.
is on bye.
Yeah.
At that point, he's no different than Bo Nix, minus the fact that he might not be playing the final few weeks. Yeah. When I reviewed my exposure, I was like a little concerned with how much Daniel Jones and Justin Fields I had. Those two, with the rookies, it's just, there's no way they're not playing, weeks 15 through 17. Whereas with Daniel Jones and Justin Fields, like all bets are off.
Yeah, and that's why I've had a harder time taking those guys. I've got a decent amount of nicks. I'm only at 8% nicks, so I'm not like hammering him, but it's a lot of Drake May, man. I'm at 20% Drake. As we were talking, another Drake May puppy finished up, and it bumped me to 20%. So my Drake May exposure went up during this podcast.
Breaking news
just
here.
finished. Yeah.
This is like in the Social Network when they're counting like the new signups or whatever, and Pat just watches each tick of his Drake May exposure go up.
There's a little stock ticker next to my exposure.
Do you want to trip? Oh, look at this. Is Slayton gone and Jalen Hyatt to double?
Let's double it up. And is Nick's there? Or we could take Nick's.
What do you think? Does this team need a 9th wide receiver?
You know what? Giants are making the playoffs on this team.
Boom. It's done. You know, and we didn't even get like Mims on this team. In my head, we had gotten Mims, but we did not get Mims.
We never got
just
him.
Javonte.
Yeah. Yeah, we just need Daniel Jones to not get benched.
This has been so funny today. My first draft, the solo draft, and this one were just speed drafts, like both sub like 40 minutes here. And then my draft with Shawn was like a full meal. It was like 55 minutes. But here's the team Pat and I wrapped up with, and we'll get Pat's thoughts here after I recap it. 2-5-9-2, Lamar and Danny Dimes. We got that 0 RB build with just 5 of the running backs here. David Montgomery, James Conner, Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, Ty Chandler. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Josh Downs, Jermaine Burton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Michael Wilson, and Jalen Hyatt. A CVS receipt of wide receivers there. And then tight ends, Trey McBride, and not Isaiah Likely, Ben Sinnott. How do you feel about this squad, Pat?
The quarterback 2 situation is a little unfortunate. It would have been nicer. Did we talk JJ McCarthy? Did he ever...
We
he on our radar?
We didn't talk him. When did he go off the board? He went off after we took Dimes, but before we took Hyatt.
We probably should have taken him instead of Dimes.
Yeah. But isn't what's our buy there? Yeah, bye week 6. Yeah, that would have probably lined up better.
Yeah. That's
if only there was a tool.
I don't take McCarthy very much. Yeah. I don't take McCarthy that much, so he wasn't really like on top of mind. But I think he would have made more sense with the Week 14 bye.
I think you're right. Yeah. And we had Chandler as well as Jefferson.
Yeah. But we had the bring back on the Giants one, so that's good.
Yeah, and you got to do it. And this paved us the path to get you a Jalen Hyatt share. What is your Slayton versus Hyatt exposure?
Let me see that. Slayton, 12%.
Yeah, you're going to be at like 2% Hyatt.
Hyatt, I have $13 of Hyatt. Cool 0%.
Wow. Up your Jacquard, bro.
Slayton, man. You know, I do prefer starters generally.
Yeah. Guess the jury's still out on that one. You ready to double our bet?
What did we bet? How much did we bet?
I think we bet $100. For people who don't know, Pat and I have a very vicious ongoing battle between Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt.
Well, it's really Darius Slayton and anyone else that isn't Darius Slayton.
Yes. Well, this will be the team. When I Venmo you, it'll be $749,900 because I'll be keeping the 100 for the Jalen Hyatt.
Hey man, if this is how you win the bet, I couldn't not be happy about that.
Any other thoughts on this team, Pat? Obviously, kind of didn't get to build out as big of a Ravens bet as we would have liked. Did get to do kind of what I'm now starting to dub the hyper fragile 0 RB a little bit here. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this team?
I mean, so the hyperfragile 0 RB thing, I think, is pretty cool. Like the fact that we don't have to spend. I'm trying to dial in like what is the right way to do this exactly. But I think this is probably my favorite version of it, where you could have stopped at 4, but it's like, but why did you? You know, like what are you getting? And what I think you're getting when you have Javonte as the RB4 is flexibility and the ability to swing for the fences and like not take Zeke. You're what you're buying is like, I don't have to take Zeke. You know,
Yeah.
I can take a pure swing for upside. I can prioritize correlation. I can prioritize late season production. I can prioritize upside profiles. But those do exist at running back too. So I don't want to box myself out of a fun running back pick when I'm like, I can be done at 4 running backs. I do want to be like, I'm done at, oh man, I'm not going to score any points at running back. I'm done at that. And then if I want to take I want to take Marshawn Lloyd, I want to take Ty Chandler. Like, yeah, that sounds great. You know, I'm probably not taking CEH, you know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna dream a little bigger.
Yeah. And I do think I want to be careful about the type of team I'm doing it with. Like, say I had a Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, you know, and I'm like Zach Charbonnet. I'm like, I'm not feeling so good about going 4 or 5 here because I'm probably taking a lot of zeros. Whereas with this team, like there's not a single guy on this roster who I don't think is getting, maybe Ty Chandler isn't getting 10 touches week 1. All of these other guys I think are pretty big locks for 10 plus touches.
Yeah, exactly. It's not really about the capital right now. It's about the profiles of the guys that you can get at that capital that we didn't used to be able to get at that same draft capital. So like you didn't used to be able to buy touches this cheaply. You know, Devin Singletary is another dude where you're just like, these are the cheapest touches I can remember. Javonte Williams, Brian Robinson, like these are very, very cheap touches. I mean, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler, Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle, like those dudes they're free. So like the touches are just so underpriced as a whole, which I kind of get. But I then want to say, all right, let me at least recognize that how many touches I bought is like way higher than I've ever been able to get for the draft capital that I spent. So I'm not going to buy more touches later. Like I'm not going to, why is this player priced here is becoming more important. Understanding why they're there, right?
Yeah.
What Marshawn Lloyd is going in a range for a very different reason than like Zeke's going in that range or whatever. Like, so pair the profiles, build a room that is coherent when you have Javonte's your RB4 with 3 other like pretty well projected backs. You could stop, you could take 2 flyers, like I floated Vidal, but like what if Vidal's a 0? What if he is in this room? Like that doesn't really matter. What if he's a smash is still very appealing. That's always appealing.
Yeah. The other nice thing is, even though, you know, a lot of times you can get in rough shape at wide receiver. We saw a lot of those rookie targets go before we picked, after we took Josh Downs. But having the elite quarterback and the elite tight end gives you the path to just going 2 there.
Yep.
And then allowing us to throw the other darts. Because normally, I think I would normally revert to, okay, choose your RB build. Like this is for sure going to be at least a 6 running back, maybe even a 7. Like I do lots of 2-7-7-2s. Like that was a popular one for me. We did not have the firepower. It's like, even though it's a 0 RB build, because of the elite onesies and the Rashee Rice dynamic, like this isn't loaded up with early firepower. So it was like this almost counterintuitive thing where you need the quantity even with a 0 RB build.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flip side of what's happening with the running back prices is that you're not like lapping anybody at receiver when you attack wide receiver early. Mostly you're staying with the pack. Now you could lap people at wide receiver, but it's difficult and it's probably requires spending like your first 6 or 7 picks on receiver, which then kind of puts you in tricky spots at the other positions. So, you know, okay, if I'm really just staying even with the pack at wide receiver, or even with the pack of teams that I think are the best bets to win, like I'm not dead even, I'm above the 50th percentile at wide receiver spend, but I'm like, there's several other teams in the room that I think are really strong at wide receiver too and are well built. Like in order to get that wide receiver room stronger, like you're going to have to keep spending through potentially volume and some of your remaining premium picks. Like you might have to do both, which like we pushed it a little bit in this room. Like Josh Downs, Jermaine Burton weren't especially big spends for us. And so I think I like that we got Wandale and Wilson. In the same way that we talk about the archetypes, like those guys are kind of more early season, and they're more like we're betting on an established role guy, kind of good enough to get out there right away and not lose his job over the course of the season, kind of thing. But if they do lose their job, it'll be at the end of the season when we have Rice back, when we have hopefully Burton coming on. And then we got the correlated piece in Hyatt. Maybe he has a spike week for us. So, yeah, I mean, it's like it's closer to hyper fragile in the type of build that we're doing. You know, it's like I'm betting more on guys who I think can score right away. But that's because when you're in the 6th round, you're taking like rookie. You're taking Rashee Rice. You're taking rookies. You're taking guys that are more suspect bets for the early part of the season than we're used to taking with that high draft capital wide receiver.
Yep. Also, this comment from Chipsy, I think it's a good point. He says, do you want to draft any Rice teams? Like, he doesn't get suspended, though. If so, 9 feels overboard. This is actually unique for me because most of my Rice teams, he's my wide receiver 5 or 6 on a more like true 0 RB build. And I am just stopping there and then hammering everything else. This was kind of a unique one where he was the 4, and then we kind of get shut out on a bunch of other wide receivers. And I do think this team needed the quantity there, but most of my Rashee Rice teams are played more like true 0 RB teams. But what do you think of that? Like, would you want to draft some where you're really thinned out at wide receiver and just saying he doesn't get suspended?
No. The reason I wouldn't is that you don't want to be that thin at receiver. So like if Rice was a running back, I think maybe I'd be more tempted to go, I'm building this like Rice doesn't get suspended. I'm building a hyper fragile running back room, right? I'm going to really benefit when this comes through, where like if Rice doesn't get suspended and you're like really counting on him, you're like one wide receiver, like 4 game injury away from being like, from feeling really thin at receiver again. Like, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as, we know we want to be one of the strongest teams at receiver. Maybe not the very strongest, maybe not the second strongest necessarily, but strong at receiver. So I don't, I want to play it like he's going to get suspended about 4 games. That's how I play it. Because I think that's the most likely. Like, that's where I would set the line, would be like 4. Like maybe. Yeah. And like, I'd set it like 4.
The thing to think about is like, and I was kind of talking about this with Shawn with Jameson Williams price, a guy I don't click that much, but we took him pretty early. And he was saying that the way he's playing Jameson Williams isn't under the illusion that he's going to be this full blown breakout, but thinking what he can do from a late season spike perspective at that cost. That's almost what you're thinking about Rice. Like at these prices, you're getting the discount of not having that production. Like, you're not even like, if he was a 2nd round or 3rd round pick, it's like, I have to play it. Yeah. Like he's not missing, but it's already baked in that he's not going to be crushing every single week.
I mean, like, instead of building teams like that, I would just say, take more Rice. Like if you want to bet on Rice not to miss any, what's the cleanest way to benefit from Rice not getting suspended at all is to have him as your highest drafted player. Right, like that's that, and then like some of those teams are gonna be good. Some of those teams are pretty good. So it feels a little precise to me, and it's like I want to benefit if he gets suspended 2 games. I want to benefit if he gets suspended 4 games. If he gets suspended 6 games, I think this is probably fine. If he gets suspended 8 games, I'm not loving taking him in the 6th so much. But like, yeah, I just want to be high. I mean, he's my 2nd highest drafted player, my highest drafted receiver. So that is what I'm doing. I'm betting that the suspension risk was overblown.
Yep. It's just rare to get these kind of prices on his talent and his offense. You got to take advantage of the ambiguity. Pat, always great drafting with you. We're going to bring Chris Spags on here in a hot sec. Let the people know what's going on at Legendary Upside this week.
Yeah, legendaryupside.com. I'm going to be back in the lab working on some articles that I was working on before the holiday. And we've got, as I mentioned, rankings, got the Sidekick. If you're interested in the dynamic rankings tool that we've developed over there, head over to legendaryupside.com/sidekick. And it comes with some perks, including the Jakar similarity that we were showing off earlier. But yeah, dynasty rankings are going to be updated today as well. Steph Miller just sent over some updates. We'll have that out soon as well. So yeah,
awesome. Yep, you can catch Pat also at 3:30 p.m. Eastern today over on the Ship Chasing channel. They'll be doing ADP chasing. They go through all the risers and fallers, and today they're doing an exercise looking for the next Trey McBride, all of the bargain bin tight ends. Are there any guys with interesting profiles? Certainly some ambiguous tight end rooms that they can sift through, and then we'll be back together on Ship Chasing later this week as well with Ben Gretsch. Pat, we will catch you later here on Best Ball Breakfast. Peace.
Later.
All right, Chris Spags from Splash Play, probably, and what I hear lately, the official tilt streamer du jour. Is this true, Chris?
I think what happens, Pete, and you put more streams on tape, and maybe you don't know because you keep it cool more often than not. I'm doing 5 days a week of drafts now, 6, I guess, on Saturdays as well. And when you accumulate that many hours of doing drafts on camera, bad things are going to happen to you more often than not, especially when it is people crushing your rooms over and over again. So I won't take any blame for it. But yeah, I try to have a real human experience. I consider it like the Truman Show, a true work of art.
Yes, Spags, by the way, if for some of you guys haven't seen over on the Splash Play channel, Spags doing daily Best Ball Mania streams. Make sure you guys are subscribed over there, enjoying what they have called themselves as the Squirt Squad. And you get comments like "Squirters Rise Up." I just want to let people know this is official name for the chat. And if you guys are YouTube members on the Splash Play channel in the Deposit Kingdom Discord, you can join the Squirt Squad chat. Do you embrace these guys, or does the squirting get you nervous at times?
I embrace them more than ever now. Like, I think the branding I have some questions about, like Splash is there. There's a lot of fun things, but ultimately, if you have a community that cares enough to name themselves, I think you kind of have to lean in. So I'm on board with it. I do wish we had a little more, user-friendly branding out there, but beggars can't be choosers. And Pete, this space is competitive as can be when you're streaming. So any little bit of a tribe you have, you just got to hug them and embrace them as much as possible.
That's right. Let's see. Who are your, I've gotten to check out some of the streams. What are some of your, before we hop into draft, some of your big stands so far? First of all, how many Best Ball Mania drafts are you through?
So I just finished number 61. My biggest stand kind of surprised me. It's Marshawn Lloyd. He's the one that I believe in the most. A great talent. I think the shiftiest runner coming out. In a situation, too, where we've already seen in minicamp him taking some work when Jacobs was out. I think there's contingent value. Plus, the worst case scenario is him being the Tyjae Spears to the Derrick Henry last year. That is Josh Jacobs. Besides that, though, it's Washington Commanders. I feel like as the summer is going on, you kind of see these ebbs and flows of the Commanders. Right now, they're all coming down in drafts. I think they're the skeleton key to win BBM. So I'm going to be heavily exposed there. But now trying to balance, how much do I really want to go there versus, what injuries, the AR injuries kind of thing that can happen to a Jaden Daniels. So I imagine I'll be about a third of my portfolio will be Washington. Yeah.
Yeah. How high are your exposures getting on a specific player? Where are you at?
Right now, my highest is Lloyd at 46%, but I would like to get him closer to 33. I'm 61 drafts in, so I still have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of get it where I need to go. But that's kind of where I wanted to view it. I wanted to load up on the guys that I think have the best shot of having good news items / people catching up, sharpening up on what they may represent to fantasy football this year. And to me, the biggest outliers are just Washington Commanders and Marshawn Lloyd. And if I'm wrong about it, I'm fucked. So that's basically
it. The nice thing, you're still not even a halfway through your drafts.
Right.
That sounds like a big number, but you can easily push that down. Obviously the situation you're hoping for is Lloyd rises. He goes where Trey Benson, and you're now I have all of these better versions of Lloyd teams than the people catching up.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. Denver, too, was a similar thing for me early. And then, you get the news items and you're not hearing rave reviews about Denver, so you dial it back. And I'm glad I'm on the stream with you. Influencer 101. We'll talk about the influence combining together here.
There we go. Yeah, I was going to say two things. Also, you know what? I need to upload. I downloaded the Spags ranking. So I'm going to, after I make this pick, I'm going to get those uploaded. Are you taking Lamb or CD at 101?
I would go CMC here. Let's build a hero.
Okay. Yeah, but if you have Lamb, I'm not opposed. I'm just saying, I was
curious.
No,
I'm riding the chalk at 101. I think it's CMC at 101, and that's the assumption. And if that goes wrong, that's where people will make the most money. But I think if you get the 101, you got to take CMC. I don't want to have less than 8% CMC.
Yeah. Also, I was going to ask you here, I'm juggling a few things. I'm going to put the ranks in, let the people know where they can get the Chris Spags ranks.
Yeah, so basically, if you join the Splash Play YouTube channel at Splash Play Pod on YouTube, if you search Splash Play, you'll find it as well. I basically give 3 perks to people. They get to join Pete's Deposit Gaming Discord and a VIP channel. They get 10 team reviews a month from me, which we had to dial down to only 10 after Mathology abused me last summer like a mule and gave me like 20 in a row. So 10 a month you get from me. I'll give you like really thorough reviews about structure, different things you might be doing wrong, you might not even realize. And I'll also give my rankings, which update weekly, and have 275 plus player blurbs in addition to the actual rankings that I move, which I think it sounded like Pat's, like the legendary upside ones, maybe a little bit of automation. Mine is all like going through in Excel one by one and going, how the fuck did this guy come up 10 picks? And then having to go, I guess this guy has to come up 10 picks. So it's been a labor of love, but it has been a thing. I don't know if Pete, if you've delved deep into your own rankings because you have so many great ones to kind of merge in, but doing your own rankings is like a chore, but it's a lot of elbow grease, sweat equity kind of stuff.
Yeah, I do not. I have no interest in doing my own. I am aggregating rankings, which is as close as I'm going to get. But I do like seeing the disparity on those. And I think it also, like, even if you're not using them, like seeing other ranking sets is helpful. One, especially if it's one like ETR that is driving the market, that's helpful to know, like, where are these trends going to go? Like a guy like Christian Kirk was the perfect example. Like ETR was way ahead of market on Christian Kirk. He was going in the early 5th. Now he's an early 4th round pick because it's just like eventually their rankings beat it down. But I also like seeing like the people I respect, like where are they way out ahead of the market? And that's why I like, doing that. And then you can start to kind of balance those player takes with your own style of drafting.
Yeah, I think the tough part for me when making rankings for the first time is like, we have like about 100 members now on the channel. And if if I'm giving these people the rankings and they take it as gospel, like I don't want them to get, 0% Rashee Rice as I'm weird about the suspension thing. I know you guys talk about that a lot today, but then it adjusts and it's like, okay, well now I'm with market on Rashee Rice. So I think that's the push pull of it, is like, I still believe ADPs, market ADP is the most important part, but ultimately like you do have to have some stands. And if you just give people rankings that are just ADPs, like what are you really doing for them?
Curveball Daddy says, just did a draft on Spags' streams, and now I got this one, but my wife just handed me our 1-month-old, so we'll see how this goes. It gives new meaning to the term "don't drop the baby" when drafting. Good luck with that. Thank you, Mr. Mister, gifting 5 memberships here on the channel. TM Longacre, always very generous with that. I meant to ask you, Spags, do you see any names here? Are any of your, your rivals, your arch nemesis, are they in this room with us?
Yeah, I'm imagining them. No, I think we're all okay. Mr. Mister is like a fine one. I think he's been in less rooms for me because I do switch the times around. Star Kindler's in a lot, but no, the one guy, I don't want to give him any credit, but there's one guy who was in 50 of my drafts last year, 50 of my PBNs, and it's like 1/3 of my action, I think, is taking too much action in any possible way.
Well, if we were doing kind of like an unusual suspects profiling here, I see 11 badges, and there's one man named Irish Drive-By, which sounds incredibly menacing. So if there's one guy I think we need to be worried about, it's someone named Irish Drive-By.
Yeah, I just got killed in a room because I did it at a really weird time. So I was in a room where somebody took 3 unstacked QBs, no receivers through 10 rounds. One where somebody, like, the rooms are different. Like the stream rooms, as you've gotten accustomed to, like, they're clean. I do still like the randomness of rooms because I think that'll give more texture to my portfolio. But, like it's Irish Drive-By. I think we can always trust an Irish Drive-By, right? Irish car bombs, Irish Drive-Bys, same thing.
There you go. We did start out with CMC here. Have you been, are you still a 0 RB bro at heart? How many 0 RB builds have you been doing otherwise?
I would say probably 2/3 of my builds are 0 RB. I think much like a lot of people out there have adjusted to the modern ADPs now, you can get a hero RB and still feel good about it. But I do think now like the top 7 is so strong, in particular, CMC, Bijan, Brees to a certain extent. Guys too, like Hiron, like I like as well. So I've been mixing those guys in. Even Derrick Henry, like I think really trying to get that texture in has been an important part of my process, but depends.
On the clock here, Barkley, Evans, Neighbors, Metcalf, DJ Moore, Cup. Who do you like?
I think if we're having fun here, I would say Neighbors should be one of them. I think he's just the most fun click at the spot. Been trying to get more Metcalf lately, and without any Niners guys or Detroit guys here to tempt us, I think I would go Metcalf for the wide receiver too.
Yeah, let's do it. I haven't been getting a ton of Metcalf, but I am hyped on that offense. Mm-hmm. I'm hyped on that Chicago week 17 game. There's lots of fun stuff you can do with the early Metcalf pick. Are you overweight Metcalf, I assume, with this ranking?
I've been trying to get him more. So actually, that's part of why I upped the ranking, because I realized he'd come up enough that I just wasn't getting him there. I like him a lot. I think that, to me, the bet on him is that he's going to be basically what Rome Odunze was at Washington, which is just this downfield vessel getting a lot of air yards on a Ryan Grubb offense. And I think for him, that's the best outcome we've ever wanted for him, is just to be, guaranteed 2 deep targets a game, let's say, of 20 plus air yards for DK Metcalf would be huge for him. So I want to make sure I'm at least with the field on him. But like, some of the guys in that area are fun. Like, you have Moore, you have Neighbors, you have even Devontae Smith. Like, there's a lot of fun clicks there. Nico is probably my favorite out of all those guys in that range. So I don't want to leave Metcalf out because of just, general blindness to being excited for other guys.
Man, what a seminal stream we had. My 69th draft, and then Mr. Poopy Butthole becoming a YouTube member. Man, I could cry. I'm just overwhelmed with joy, Spags.
I'm surprised he wasn't already, because he's been in the Splash Play universe for, I think, a good year now. Like, I saw the tweets about him being in draft rooms. We were like, we got to watch out for Mr. Poopy Butthole. And he's just a Rick and Morty fan like any of us. And he's been doing the bit. He even types ooh-wee and chats to me if he's asking for a team review. So I love Mr. Poopy Butthole.
I love it. Yeah. So we started with CMC, Neighbors, DK Metcalf. Are you at the point, are you thinking, I know last year you were doing kind of pulling up some guys to the 2-3 turn for uniqueness purposes. Is that something you've started to mess around with?
Well, no, that didn't work out too well because it was Christian Watson I was pulling up last year. So it can, like, I think I'm tempted by the, if you have CMC, you add on Laporta as a bring back. Like, I thought that'd be more of a thing, but now the ADP is so far gone. I'm not there yet. I guess if we get into August and the ADPs are still where they are and Laporta's the opposite side of the board, I could see doing that. But I think your point earlier about week 17 correlation is pretty sound. And I think about it a lot. Like, I tend to disagree a little bit in terms of like, oh, these guys in the first couple rounds, they can stand on their own, get 2 touchdowns. It doesn't matter. Because I do think capturing that, like, let's say Detroit Niners goes nuts. Like, if you have, CMC, Laporta, and Ayuk or Debo, one of them goes nuts there. Like, that could be the entire game stack you need for week 17 that matters. So I do try to mix that in, but there isn't one screaming to me like last year where it's like, I just thought people were going to have Jefferson and Watson, and Pete would end up winning Jefferson and Jaden Reed. So basically the same thing.
Yeah. And I think where you get into trouble with it more is like, I'm way more on board with it come August, right? That's kind of always been my pushback of like, when the board gets shuffled up a little bit, say there was an Ayuk trade, some of the stuff that you thought was unique could just become chalk. And then it was like, maybe you were just building slightly watered down versions. But the part of the argument I'm certainly open to, and I've been doing, is like, this second round tier is really flat. I mean, Shawn was on in our draft a couple drafts ago saying he thinks the round 5 wide receivers are stronger than the round 4. So if you have these like tier based takes and you want to shuffle it up or like default to correlation within that tier, I have no problem with it. It's mainly like if you're constantly reaching for maybe a lesser player just for that week 17 correlation early, I think that can get you into trouble if you're constantly doing it.
No, I think that makes a lot more sense too. And I think if things fall to you, not looking the gift horse in the mouth throughout BBM is an important part, because like last year you might have passed up Miami doubles that were easy there and that ended up winning. But there was a point where the ADP got away from Jaden and Tyreek being as cleanly laid out. So I think just trying to scoop stuff while you can. But then, yeah, I'm with you, like just not getting too out of pocket until we are like we know everything from camp and we know what we can do with it.
So we see Sam Laporta, Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Trey McBride go. We're about to pick at the 4-5 turn here. Before we pick, where have you been on the elite tight ends? Have you been grabbing these top 6, 7 guys?
I'm most a fan of McBride. I like Laporta as well. McLaurin would have been my ideal pick there. Mr. God forbid. Keenan Allen's got to be one of the picks, right? I think no matter what.
I like Keenan a lot. We get that correlation with Metcalf. Strong pick here. Yeah. And then where do you think we go with the other one? I'm checking ADP. Pacheco is at the top of ours, or do we want to grab another wide receiver or tight end?
I'm a little worried about getting buried a little too deep in the avalanche. So I would say Hollywood here. Honestly, for a team with you, I don't take a lot of Hollywood as my wide receiver 4. So I can live with that. I don't know, unless something else screams to you, I think I would go Hollywood.
No, let's mix it up. I don't click him a lot. I did a Kincaid team with Shawn here earlier. If we had started CeeDee Lamb, I would have been like, this is a great spot to get Pacheco. Never know what's going to come back around to us. Like even at pick 72, it can get thinned out a little bit. So might as well lock that up. So here's the team: CMC, Neighbors, Metcalf, Keenan, Hollywood. And I know you had mentioned you're a little bit lower on Rice. Are you playing this more through liking to play it through Hollywood Brown?
I'm actually avoiding the Chiefs a lot overall. I think to me, what I saw last year, and this is one where markets don't agree with me on it, so it's fine. This is going to be one of my stands. But like, I think the way that Mahomes learned to win last year was a big leap that QBs make a lot in their careers when they get to a certain point. And we'll see if the defense is good. That was a good defense last year. It's lost a few guys. But that defense carried that team last year where he was dropping back less, still a high pass rate. But overall, I think the offense, like people were getting really stoked about it being this downfield passing offense when we saw last year that the evolution of it was targeting Rashee Rice close to the line of scrimmage, was targeting Kelsey, mixing him in less. Like, I think the Chiefs are a bet from people who've liked fantasy football for the last 5 years and not a bet that fully reflect the reality of now. So I actually like Marquise Brown a lot as like a standalone Chiefs piece because I think that he's cutting into everything. I think Worthy's cutting into everything. And it's just a different equation this year than last year for Rice and Kelsey, where they were basically the only two dudes that command a target in a room full of nobody that could.
Yeah, I think, Brown has been the toughest for me to click, but I do think you want to, one of the points Ben Gretsch has made too is like a couple of these Chiefs players are massively undervalued depending on if Worthy is a bust, if Rashee Rice gets suspended for longer, like then all of a sudden in those scenarios, like Kelsey and Hollywood Brown are just absolute smashes. And so thinking through like how those potential guys outperform their ADP, it probably comes at the expense of the other. So I do like the idea of taking stabs on these guys. And, we've been getting some discounts on Rashee Rice. He goes at pick 58 here to Star Kindler. So there's going to be no huge discounts. 3 Chiefs wide receivers in round 5 here, Spags.
Yeah, I feel like we missed the buying point for Rice if you weren't taking him in the 80s and 70s and absorbing that suspension risk. And now him coming back to the 50s, he's like, granted, not priced where he was on the big board. He was going in the 20s and sometimes the teens. But I think now, like, the suspension risk is kind of getting baked back out. And I don't know. I'm just like not a big Chiefs guy. I feel like, to me, Pete, and you might feel differently, like the very binary takes in football, like every year where it's like CMC is going to be great. Chiefs are going to be great again after winning a Super Bowl. And the offense is going to be resurgent after being not talented at all last year. I just don't find those takes to be fun because like they're chalky and I kind of, like I want to go a different direction. So people might feel like I'm a fool for going like I'm avoiding Chiefs, but if you avoid Chiefs, you can get more Texans, you get more stuff in that range as well. You get more Commanders, right? And who wouldn't want the Commanders over the Chiefs, Pete?
Well, yeah. And it sounds like you're, that's a thing that, happens. It's interesting, like reverse engineering your draft and thinking, what can I get later? What do I like late? What do I think is mispriced? And that is going to kind of dictate some of your early round decisions. So then thinking through that from like a portfolio standpoint is also interesting, and knowing like, yeah, you're not going to be able to cover every single pick on the board, especially if you have some like concrete things you want to do in the majority of your drafts.
Yeah, and I think too, there's and I've said this too about both content creators and the entire community writ large. I think enough people have been doing this regularly for 5 years, where people love the Lamar Mark Andrews click is like just one example. I know you do too, and I think it's a good click. But it's like this thing where we're locking in the last 5 years of production for these guys and going, let's stack them up. We can get them stacked up every draft, and I think that's where I push back. Like part of the joy for me of football every year is like, what can we pan for gold for what's going to happen this year, as opposed to things that have happened the last 4 or 5 years.
We're about to click at the 6-7 turn. Anthony Richardson slides all the way to 69, comes off the board. We'll see what Mr. Mister does here. CJ Stroud doesn't have much interest to our team, but we do see Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas, and Kenneth Walker may be interesting with DK. What do you think?
Honestly, so I love Montgomery with McCaffrey because you can corner, I think, a 2-touchdown game from one of those guys in week 17. So I think that'd be a fun one. Walker, I'm down on relative to his ADP. You could see in the ranks I have him behind Montgomery. I would say one of the receivers or Walker if you really want to be adventurous, I guess, and try to dig out of our hole.
Yeah, let's do at least one wide receiver here. I don't mind Montgomery with CMC. Yeah, who's your preference on Ladd or Brian Thomas for this team as our wide receiver 5?
I think Brian Thomas for me.
Yep.
Just more of a red zone threat. Like Ladd, I like enough that he's ranked right there with Brian Thomas. But if they were looking for upside at the wide receiver 5 spot, especially in half-point PPR, like I think Ladd to me is very much a DraftKings play. And I hate doing that. Like he's fine on Underdog too, but like he's full-point PPR guy. Brian Thomas is like a shot to be a touchdown beast because that's what he was at LSU. That's what this team for Jacksonville needs. So I think for us, it makes sense.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I've been viewing Ladd. I don't click him a ton, but when we do have some veteran guys like DK and Keenan and Hollywood Brown, I do kind of like taking a bigger swing there. And I do think Brian Thomas is the bigger swing. It makes sense as our wide receiver 5. So we got CMC, David Montgomery at running back, Neighbors, Metcalf, Keenan, Hollywood Brown, Brian Thomas. So no quarterbacks, no tight ends. Although with this room, other than Patrick Mahomes, every single quarterback tied to one of our players is still available.
Yeah, so that's the hope, I think, if you're not getting that elite QB in. And I love Stroud, I love AR, I love those guys, but I think being more mindful of what you have late, like Derek Carr is free in drafts, and he's the starter for New Orleans. Like Baker Mayfield, usually free in drafts. I think there's some backslide there without Canales, but that's a play you could tack on late. There's so many late QB builds you could do late and still feel good about, whether you take 2 or 3, that I've been trying to be a little bit less like, oh, elite QBs here, I got to take them, especially, there's a lot of unstacked elite QBs too that I would just never do.
I would say of all the different things, like I'm pretty diversified with my drafting. I think the one thing I'll be probably most underweight to is elite quarterback. I have a hard time getting there. I also like building out a lot of the late stacks. I really like how a lot of my 3 quarterback teams look. And I think you can kind of middle it, say with a guy like Jaden Daniels, where I love the idea of like Jaden Daniels and 3 quarterback builds where you're getting the upside, the single game upside, but you can also build out 3 separate stacks for the playoffs. Whereas if you take a Lamar, like getting to 3 quarterback builds, like doesn't make sense from a draft capital standpoint. But with a guy like Daniels, you can kind of have that cake and eat it too, the single game upside and the multiple stacks. So yeah, I am a little worried that I'm going to be underweight elite quarterback, but I don't know. I look at the opportunity cost and it's hard for me to constantly click those quarterbacks.
Yeah, I view Jaden a little bit differently. And I think actually this is a lot of that you said to me last year with Anthony Richardson, where I take Jaden Daniels when I don't have league QB and I'm like, who's going to go in there and win this league for me? Yeah, potentially at pick 100. I think Jaden Daniels is the one guy there that I feel like has that upside, both, in a bad situation and in a really good one, that if he is going to be, like I believe, like he's going to be CJ Stroud and AR rolled into one. I think that for him, even if he's bad, he's going to be probably AR. So that's something that I kind of hold near and dear with Jaden. But I agree, like the 3 QB builds, like especially for pocket passers, like those are the ones I really like 3 QB, where you get Stafford, you get Cousins, you get, I don't know, I guess Deshaun's not a statue QB, but he might be at some point soon. You get 3 of those guys there and you're getting a guaranteed starter with logical stack partners. And then theoretically, the whole stack rises up, I guess, for some of those guys.
Yeah. This is kind of a funny random question from CW. Can one idiot drafting players way early than their ADP cause the draft to get thrown out? Oh, I thought you were going to ask, can it cause the ADP to move? I had one of my few drafts get refunded.
Only if it's you, Pete. You're the only one that can move idiot ADPs if you wanted to. You could do a bid for an entire year to make all bad ADPs.
The question I thought I was answering is like in the sprint where there's been very few drafts, like someone took Josh Allen really early in that contest. And so he's had like an ADP that's a round higher than his Best Ball Mania ADP because of that small sample size. The Underdog has their quality control checks and balances with those drafts. Generally, one rogue pick is not going to get a draft thrown out. I mean, Davis Maddock has killed multiple teams because of the star method. So I would not consider that. Man, TM Longacre, do you want to go off on him for taking Daniels? I was like,
he fucking does this every draft. That's why I don't want him in every fucking room, because he does this shit over and he doesn't mean to do it. He just does it every fucking time.
We'll give him his due in a second. We are on the clock here. What do you think?
Pollard for one of them, I think, to start setting up Jacksonville, Tennessee. I like Mostert. I worry what we're doing if we don't go that way.
We could grab Njoku. I mean, we could have gone Mostert Njoku there, but that's off the table. I think Lockett, if we want to set up the double.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do Lockett. I don't get enough DK at Lockett, I think.
Yeah, it was funny because in my head, as we were talking about Jaden Daniels, I was like, oh, this is actually going to line up well. Him at 95 or 98, just slightly ahead of ADP. We could build out the Spags dream team. But TM Longacre, he sent the 5 memberships in advance because he already knew I'm about to, dick these guys over on Jaden Daniels.
Which I think is the fair part of it. Like the big issue I had with the guy who took a third of my portfolio last year is like, you can't not be a paying member. Like you have to be a paying member if you're going to do that. And it's $5 for a month. So I think that's bullshit. But this is what happens every time too. And it was worse for me. I don't know, because I don't know if you were doing quite as many drafts and you weren't having hard player takes. For the big board, I do all my own research. Like I start in January, I do it early. So I was in the rooms of these fuckers and they're taking all my own information and drafting my guys before I get access to them. And it's like, that's where the tilt comes in, is if you're like doing things and you're coming up with good takes and you're showing people the entire process and they're like, cool, now your process is mine and I'm going to take your dude. So that's what it hurts me the most.
I think you gotta like segment how you think about your stream drafts. And if you think you have a really big edge or like the market hadn't gotten efficient yet, you got to like jam in a bunch of drafts on your own, like on the side before to where you don't put the like kind of pressure. But who am I take back everything I just said. People want to see you tilt. Do not listen to my anti-tilt advice, Chris.
Well, I just want it to come organically. Like, I don't want to do fake bits. Like, I don't want to like do, ham it up. Like, I'll ham it up a little bit in the motion of it. I'll start going off on everything and calling names and doing the whole thing, doing the tough fish bit. I believe is the guy from poker. So like, I'm trying to, lean in when it's there. But that said, like, I'm glad this is on your account. I don't have to deal with it. I don't have to be too bad at Mr. And he paid the price. Ultimately, he paid the price.
He did. He paid the price. All right. Yeah. Here's the team so far. So we got 3 running back, 6 wide receiver build. This is a unique team for me. CMC, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, and then 6 wide receivers. So we're doing real good there. Neighbors, Metcalf, Keenan, Hollywood, Brian Thomas, Tyler Lockett. So as long as we can close the loop on some of these stacks, I think we're in good shape. And because we're ahead of the 8 ball at wide receiver with CMC, we got a lot of leeway at running back. The interesting thing will be, does this become a 3 quarterback, 3 tight end build?
I think it's possible. Yeah. I think we have optionality, which is what I like at this point. And that's really the big thing for me with these, current ADPs is like, you can get 5 receivers in your top 75. You can get 3 running backs as long as you can kind of pass the, which I like elite QB enough. I like elite tight end enough. But if you eschew those things, like you can have a really good base for a team that gives you optionality to do whatever you want on top of it. So I think that's where we are now. I'm hoping, but God forbid we get sniped and everything. Towards the end of the draft.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of ends up being the spot too, where there's not really any huge tight end values here. So this does seem like a spot. Like, do you want to grab a Lawrence or Brock?
I would go Lawrence over Brock, I think. Probably not worth pushing it again at this point, right at ADP. So yeah, let's go Lawrence for one of our QBs.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, do you want to go tight end?
I don't want to force it. Unless do you like, at ADP, you're looking at Schultz, Freiermuth, Kmet. I don't mind like pushing for at this point, like a punt tight end if you like one of these running backs here.
Chase Brown's probably my favorite, but you've got a lot of him. If you're low on Ford, I would say him maybe, or
Ford. I'm never going to turn down another Chase
Brown.
Okay,
yeah, let's do Chase.
Chase Brown's your guy. Yeah. To me, I like, when I have the CMC teams, like Chase Brown, I acknowledge there's a pretty wide range of outcomes, but I think when we have a CMC, Montgomery, Pollard start, like we have a ton of touches here, I think, of as far as what we're getting. So Brown, I kind of like as that running back 4. And then I don't know where you're at on the stuff I was talking about with Kerrane, but like if we ended up needing to stop here at 4, like I think you could have this be a 4 running back team.
Yeah, I think that's been a thing I've noticed too. So I was glad to hear you guys talking about it so intelligently, but like stopping at 5, like I do want to get to 6 and 7 more. And that was my goal coming to this year, is like, I want to make sure I'm not completely dead in the water at RB, because there's so many guys from pick, obviously we got Christian McCaffrey here, so hard to argue that, but from pick 70, even like to the Mixon tier after, like you can get 5 RBs, maybe even 4. And like, you're getting guaranteed starters, you're getting guys at offenses that are ascending. So I think going less RBs this year might be the move, and capping yourself at 4 and 5 more, as long as you get like legit guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want to put the CMC stuff to good use, right? Like if you're taking CMC 101 over these receivers, we're getting another legendary season. It's going to be hard for these other running backs to hit your starting lineup. Especially if we're grabbing some other, bankable touches early. So yeah, I like that move there. And it's harder. This is the only downside too, when you spend on like 6 wide receivers early, is like, well, does a wide receiver make sense? If we were to get sniped and we need to build out another backdoor stack, we might want to leave one more wide receiver in our back pocket, which is why I agree with you. Like ideally, like in a perfect world, it would have been a tight end pick to give us max kind of flexibility, but I also don't want to force it and take a guy, around ahead of ADP just because that's what we need.
Yeah, and I like Schultz enough that I could do it sometimes, but in this build where we don't have any Baltimore, don't have any Houston, like trying to get less Schultz in those kind of spots, even though I like him a lot in concentrated bets, because like a tight end like him picking up 2 touchdowns on week 17 because everybody else is covered versus Baltimore, like, and plus the entire year, like I think Schultz to me is probably one of the more underappreciated tight ends in that spot, but maybe he'll come back to us. Who knows?
Yeah. Freiermuth went at 128 here. Yeah, looking at the rest of our team here, it really is, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spots. 3 of them likely tight ends. That leaves 4, at least one other quarterback, 3. I do think this is probably 3 quarterback, 5 running back, 7 wide receiver, 3 tight end, if my math is correct.
Yeah,
there.
or we could stop at 4 running backs if we wanted. Like I think,
Yeah,
and free up that one more spot.
Yeah, exactly. I think if that kind of, when you do head into the last round, if that's your choice, you can kind of just take whatever player you think makes the most sense at that point. It doesn't have to be for structural purposes.
Yep, I'm with you on that.
We didn't get to talk about Pollard. Do you have a decent amount of Spears too, or are you mainly playing that through Pollard?
I think both of them are the exact same play. I mean, obviously different ADPs, but to me, like, I wouldn't say it's quite the Miami backfield of last year, of that Pete famously got a Miami running back in every draft. But I think it's one where if you have those guys at ADP, they're part of a 0 RB build, like getting one of them feels pretty good. Probably have more Spears right now, if I had to guess. I could take a quick look. Yeah, a little more Spears. Actually, no. I am flat at like 6.5% of both guys right now. So prepared to have more if they start to come down, which I have to assume like maybe they will. But I like Spears, I think, relative to costs, but Pollard's there. Take Pollard.
Yeah, and I wrote up on FantasyLife a couple weeks ago my favorite backfield like stacks that I'm willing to pair together, and like Pollard and Spears is up there as one of my favorites. Especially with the fact like it sounds like they're going to be used interchangeably. It seems like the kind of spot where they both could pay off their ADP and then just the massive contingent upside. Man, watching both Schultz and Kmet there go, I was hoping we would get one of those guys. Musgrave is here. We got sniped on Gabe, on Marshawn Lloyd. Please tilt and help us make this pick here.
I would say I don't know if we need to take tight end yet. Let's go Musgrave. Just to get one tight end in. Not a Hawkinson guy. Don't want to do that pick.
The other thing to just think through, Spags, do we want to just take Geno here and not risk him not coming back to his ADP?
God, I hate reaching this much for Geno, knowing that he goes 180 sometimes, but I think it's where for this team, it does make sense. And then one of our tight ends could be Noah Fant as well. So let's see Geno.
I think the most likely thing is he comes back, but I think about like what happens to this team if we don't get him and then we don't have any other. I mean, then this is like a Daniel Dimes. It's not the end of the world, but I don't, because there's no screaming target here for us. I'm like, let's just lock up the quarterback.
Yeah, no, I think that's reasonable here. And again, that's the flexibility that you get. I know people are making fun of the flexibility thing in the chat, but ultimately, like, that is sort of the thing, is like being able to take Geno a little bit early is a luxury. Definitely the earliest I've taken Geno in a draft, but when you're at the 1-2 turn, like, what are you going to do?
It was a brutal run for picks, because this was my thought process as we were coming up here. I was like, all right, Spags already said how much he loves Marshawn Lloyd. I love Marshawn Lloyd. He'd be a great running back 5 on this build. Gabe Davis, get us that final stack with Trevor Lawrence doubled. Okay. I'm like, and then I see the 2 tight ends. I'm like, Schultz, huge ADP value, or Cole Kmet, basically stack up the Bears without Caleb, little bring back for our Geno stuff. And they just all go boom, 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 boom.
Just suck. That's the thing with all these bad dreams. They soak up all the value. That's why you got to switch up your times. Like Pete, I don't know if you followed it that closely, but I'll put my draft time 11. I'll start 10:45. I'll start today. I started at 11:10. Like you're not fucking. You got to earn my EV if you're going to try to get me on stream. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, like I said, I'm at peace with my Best Ball Mania drafts being part of this streamed universe and the guests and this giant melting pot and hodgepodge. But like, that's why it's nice for me. Like over the weekend, I maxed that Pitbull in like 2 days. And I was like, all right, I get to build all the teams I want. I could get in them at weird times. I don't have to let people know I'm hopping at a Pitbull. So I think if there weren't a bunch of other contest offerings, I'd maybe feel a little more protective. But I think Underdog has done a good job of giving us so many other places to draft as well.
Yeah, my role this year is all going towards BBM. I did the mini schnauzer on when I was on vacation, which was a lot of fun. I don't know if did you give a public take about the mini schnauzers? I enjoyed that so much and would like to have a 10-second clock tournament all year long, ideally.
Well, that's what I loved about the Pitbulls. They offered a 15-second clock.
Oh, okay.
That. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I loved it. I mean, there were so many. The amount of times where I rarely have time for a 45-minute draft outside of streaming. Maybe Cardio Club if I'm like working out and I can double it up. But the amount of times I have time for a 20 or 25-minute draft, like there's way more. So I was like, I would love to have 10-second clocks and be like, oh, I can squeeze in a draft here.
And also too, like I think the kind of work that you do, I mean, you've brain trained me as well as anybody in the space has, but for yourself too, it's like that's I think what we're built to do, especially not streaming, just having 10 seconds to make a pick, knowing that, you know, I don't have to panic and reach for correlation, and knowing too the room is going to panic around you more because they're not able to think that quickly. I think that's one of the fun parts of drafting. I love my Schnauzer portfolio. I wish I had 150 of those.
Yeah, I did have like the levels of like best ball bro where I'm like, man, these fast drafts are awesome. And it was like my 7th pit bull draft. And I went and I was hovering over the 15-second option. And I was like, but all the sharps want to be in the fast one. And I bet the people who want a little bit more time are less badges. I'm going to go in the 30-second ones counterintuitively, which is just like the perfect microcosm of how our brains work. We're like, yes, fast clocks. This is so good. Don't waste our time. And it's like, but the rooms are softer in the 30-second ones.
I see. I thought the 10-second rooms, I mean, it was the Schnauzer, so it might be a little different than the Pitbull was, but like, I thought the 10-second rooms were not sharp at all. And I was surprised too. It wasn't people timing out. It wasn't people like, you know, like it wasn't the top value being gone. Like I think I got Stroud at 85 in one and got like a bunch of like 12 pick discounts because people had their queue and couldn't keep up. Maybe they were multi-tabling. So I thought the 10 seconds were the softest for the Schnauzer, but it's fun we could debate it. What would be your ideal clock if you could choose from the start?
I think the 15-second.
Yeah.
We did. I was hoping Noah Fant would come back to us, kind of just triple up Gino. He goes at 160. We can see what we got cooking here. This could be a spot to get our 5th running back. We could set up another backdoor stack. We could also consider making sure we get another tight end in this range as well. We could figure this out.
I think we got, Fant coming up. There hasn't been any signal from Fant that deserves him coming up 20 spots all of a sudden.
No, just tilting Spags. You get the tilt equity.
That's basically it.
You mentioned Baker before. We could do Baker and Otten as a stack. Anything else you see here that you like?
Yeah, I mean, Baker and Otten would work.
If there's something else that's more inspiring to you.
I like Bucky. I mean, Bucky's one of my preferred RB targets. We're coming a little early for him, but he's not making it back.
Here, well, let's do Baker first, and then we can let's talk through Bucky versus Cade.
So we do have another tight end out potentially later that would correlate with our Jacksonville bet. So that would be part of my logic there. I just love Bucky. He was the best RB in football last year, college football last year. And I think people really like Rashad White. And I think the Oppo part is going to hit with Bucky. So I like getting that leverage too.
I like it similar to the Chase Brown thing. Like Bucky, I think Bucky and Chase Brown are 2 of my 3 most drafted players. So you're not going to get any pushback on me there. Also, one of the fun things when I talk about like with Kerrane, with like the diversifying, like to me, it's diversifying the teams around your biggest player stands. Like this is a very unique team for me, like just how it got constructed and even some of the players, but then pairing them with some of my favorite players that I take in a lot of other types of builds, and Bucky and Chase is fun to me. The other thing too is Jalen McMillan. There's some other ways, like if we wanted to build out this Baker bet, obviously there's some cheap Carolina bringbacks as well. So I think getting our 3rd quarterback there and not dealing with the Daniel Jones stuff worked out well.
Yeah, I do like Daniel Jones enough. Like I thought, and I don't want to read into Hard Knocks because Hard Knocks is just PR, but I thought the way they spoke about him was like, we got to make our bet on him. We're paying him $40 million a year. He can't be handing off to a $15 million running back. Like it seems like they're going to give him the run out. And I do think when you take Malik Neighbors, like the bet is basically that Daniel Jones's run out's going to hit from week 1. I kind of think like feels the same to me as like Justin Fields and DJ Moore did last year, where for Moore to be as good as he was at his ADP, Justin Fields had to be good enough, at least in those games that Moore spiked. And he was. I think it's kind of the same thing for Neighbors, where, if you take Neighbors, like Daniel Jones kind of has to be going from week 1. And I know I'm the Drew Lock guy, or historically have been the Drew Lock guy, but like from what it sounds like so far, I don't think Drew Lock is the bet you want to see happening there for the Giants.
It's funny. I was thinking about the historical brand guy when you were sitting in the StreamYard hopper and Pat and I were talking about Darius Slayton. Like Darius Slayton was one of the poster boys for our very early splash play shows. It was like Robbie Anderson and Darius Slayton were like the guys every week we just kept like betting on, because they're like, one of these deep bombs has to hit. And I think both of them were like relatively undervalued at the time. And now Darius Slayton is like some dusty veteran at this point.
He spiked with Tommy DeVito last year.
Yeah.
At QB. Like he had a few breaks. I think Hyatt's a better play. I'm on your side fully. Like Hyatt, Hyatt was getting the first team work when Slayton was getting up to speed mini camp, and Hyatt too. Like this is a young wide receiver core that people don't fully realize. Like it's Wandale, who this regime drafted. It's it's Slayton. Slayton is a little bit older, obviously. Then you have Hyatt, who they drafted, Neighbors, who they drafted. I think they want to see how that Wandale Hyatt Neighbors threesome goes, because if that hits and then like you're paying off Jones's contract, like I think that's a big bet. So I like Slayton more as a player. Like he's a more like if he's going to the Chiefs, he can win you a Super Bowl potentially or be a part of a Super Bowl winning team. Whereas Hyatt's more like we got to develop this guy. He's going to get routes just through that prism.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I want to be careful with those spots early on in drafting, because again, like, the whole point is like, say it is Slayton who wins the job, which is possible. Like, I don't want to be having a bunch of teams with zeros on it. Like, but I do feel like if one guy is a zero, I think it's probably more likely Slayton in that like Jalen Hyatt wins the job, the younger player. Whereas I still think like it's unlikely that Jalen Hyatt like doesn't get to see the field at some point and prove it. Like they just spent a very early round pick on this guy. I don't think they're going to abandon him this early, especially as they inject a bunch of other new variables into their offense. So yeah, I want to be careful not to have too much of him at this point. Someone asked me the other day, are you still drafting Jalen Hyatt? And I basically just said only in like correlation stuff. If I have the giant stack and Indy bring back, I'm not like one-offing him. I don't have that confidence level, but I still like him as a dart throw.
I think when you've got 7 receivers in round 18 and you're like, I need an 8th, like Hyatt's a guy that like could capably give you 18-point games. And I think that's sort of like, even if there's one out of every 8 weeks, like I think he can give you those. So that's where I like Hyatt, but 18th round has kind of gotten ugly with a lot of guys moving up.
I had some dreams about Jalen McMillan. I was like, are we going to get, finally a stream gift here? I mean, it's right at his ADP. It's nothing crazy.
Fucking Chig goes too. Come on,
Kate
man. We got Otten back. That's good.
Cade does come back. I will take that as a win. So we have 2 more picks left. I think it's probably wide receiver and tight end. I don't think Juwan Johnson's a bad pick. I love Devontae Walker as well. If you want a 7th wide receiver, what do you think?
I like Tez. I take a lot of Tez. Tyler Boyd for Jacksonville, Tennessee to game stack that out might be the move because we lost Chig.
Let's do it.
I'm not the hugest Boyd guy in the world, but I think when you have Jacksonville, Tennessee, he's the easy click here. And when Chig is gone for no reason, a couple picks before you.
Yes. So now we have, as we head to our last pick, we got a 3-5-7-2. We got Lawrence stacked up with Brian Thomas and bringing back the Pollard and Boyd playing that game. We got Geno double stacked with Metcalf and Lockett, bringing it back with Keenan Allen. And then we have Baker stacked up with Bucky and Cade Otton. Cade Otton fell back to us, which was really nice to get that stack and the position of need worked out well. And then our other kind of one-off pieces, well, we have the CMC Montgomery mini, we have Chase Brown, we have Neighbors, we have Hollywood Brown, Brian Thomas. Oh yeah, I already mentioned him, and Luke Musgrave. So pretty good as far as correlation here. Likely looking at a final tight end dart throw in round 18.
Yeah, I think it could have been a little cleaner if some guys fell to us, but I still think we have game stacks. We have stacks. Like we have a few many things going on. So I think the build works. It's just sometimes is what happens where you just get death by 1,000 cuts for your ideal correlations, your Marie Kondo style correlations.
Yeah, it is like sometimes it is. It works out. Like I was thinking of one thing I liked about this team is like so many of my Geno stacks are, have like one of JSN or Noah Fant, or it's mainly combos with those 3, JSN, Noah Fant and Lockett. And so then to get a Metcalf Lockett without those other 2 who, by ADP are the more fringier bets. I guess JSN goes ahead of Lockett, but from what we think we're getting from these guys, I like to mix some of those into the portfolio.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I think this team, I would have loved to come in and built like a world beater team that everybody's like, whoa, Spags is here and this team is so fucking sick. But this is just a working class team. This team puts its hard hat on, it goes to work, and hopefully our 3 QBs will keep their jobs the entire year.
That would be a really good bid if you became the guy that posted the most just like mediocre, like completely fine, nothing special, nothing egregious like teams to Twitter. And you were just like, whoa. It's just like every pick at ADP, like a couple correlations, not too many rookies, but not so many that people are like, oh, look at all those dusty vets. Like basically reverse engagement farming. Like, can I post something so harmless and unprovocative that no one wants to even interact with it?
You'd have to have some early RBs in there to really get the Twitter engagement. They're like, oh, wow, I love that RB. Everybody will come out of the woodwork for it. But I honestly, that's how I feel about some people's teams now, where it's like, this team has 25 likes on Twitter. Like, what? Why am I getting this on For You? This seems fucking nothing.
Hey, you know what? Here's the thing. Like Spags, you got a YouTube channel. You know, we got this platform. This is where we get to get our takes off. You know, for some people, it's x.com. This is where you get the platform to share your team, share your takes. It is wild though, the amount of teams. Like, I would love to see if Elon allowed us to get into the analytics of how many Underdog screenshots were posted last year. You know how like the Google Analytics for search terms? I would love to see the spike in Underdog screenshots this year.
Just by the fact that the draft started in January this year, there's got to be extra time from that. But it's a lot, and it gets a lot of engagement. I'm the opposite way, I guess, of a lot of people out there, where I guess kind of like you said, I have a YouTube stream, so I get all my takes on YouTube. And I feel like I don't have to tweet anymore because I have an hour a day to ramble about every take that I have. So like for me, like I'm not that world now, but man, my For You page is littered with screenshots more than ever, and I hope some of them are good teams, actually.
Yeah. All right, Spags, we are staring down the barrel of our 18th round pick. Yeah, just Musgrave and Otten. I do think this is a tight end pick. There's definitely some dumpster diving names here. I have an intriguing one that I'm curious if you're on board with.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I know one. So actually, one that's on the screen right now that I'm curious your thoughts on. Gesicki getting some talk, but it's kind of the slow period where they're just looking for something to talk about. You buy any of the Gesicki stuff? Because I feel like people like him enough historically that he might be on a Noah Fant style rise soon.
Gesicki is one of those guys where I'm like, I've been willing to take a stab on him like every year in every environment. I'm like, he's too good for his role in Miami. Like he's got to break out. Then it's like, he's going to beat out Hunter Henry. Like now I'm like, he's got, one of the best setups he's had. So I'm very on board with him. Gesicki, we have Chase Brown. The other name I was going to toss out is Jatavian Sanders as the bring back to our Tampa Bay stuff.
I'm a little down on Sanders because it feels like that's just a logjam. It's kind of an Indianapolis thing with Ian Thomas and Tommy Tremble. Like Bellinger, I would put in the mix too. I think though he is a cut candidate potentially according to some beat guys, but I don't see how he would be. I'm down with whoever you think is the best out of this trio. I have no lean really.
I think it's really close between Gesicki and Sanders. So your pick. You want to go Gesicki?
Yeah, we have Chase Brown. Let's go Sanders. We have enough Tampa Bay. We'll get the Oppo.
All right. You know what? We gotta, if we're gonna do the week 17 correlation, we gotta tie a bow on that.
Exactly. Jatavian Sanders, a shitty bow, but a bow nonetheless.
But I will say, not that I don't think Gesicki has single game upside, but similar to what we were talking about before, right? Like if you do go the route of needing 3 at the 1Z, like wanting to get a true breakout type option there. And I realized that the probability of that for Sanders is low just with his draft capital. And he had some, warts on his prospect profile. But like, if there is going to be a guy who can surprise and have a really big role at the end of the season, maybe Bryce Young makes a leap. Like Sanders is one of these few guys down here that I think has actual breakout potential.
Keith is a funny chat. Sanders is like using a rubber band as a bow. That could work. That could work for the occasional spike.
I'm going to fall asleep thinking about this analogy, trying to see if I can figure out what you
just put your little paperclip in there and you shoot it. That's just Jatavian Sanders.
Yeah.
I hope he plays, honestly, because I have enough of him early on. I just feel like there's not one whisper of him in camp, which I feel like is one of those things that goes, dial back your exposure for now until we hear he's actually out there existing.
Well, he's like the yin and yang to Cade Otton, right? Like Cade Otton ran the most snaps of any tight end last year. Like, he's going to be on the field, but is he going to earn targets? Like, what is it going to be? Jatavian Sanders is like a true black box. I think you have every concern that people used to have, like our rookie tight end is going to be a factor. He's going to a bad offense. Like, what if he's not good as a prospect? Like, you are needing to hit a couple leg parlay here, but again, this team, we didn't actually draft as many rookies as I think even you and I would normally draft. We have Bucky, we had Neighbors, and Brian Thomas. So I like getting a little rookie sprinkle there at the end at tight end.
You know, I think this team's unique. It's definitely unique by my standards as well. Last year, one of my flaws, I think my portfolio, which actually ended up not being a terrible flaw, was like I did rely on thin tight end plays. Thankfully, some of the thin tight end plays ended up being like Sam Laporta and I guess Musgrave to a lesser extent. But I like late tight end. If you're not going to take an elite, like I feel like going 3 late in some capacity is the move. I don't know if our 3 are the best to go with late, but we did the best we could.
Yeah. Again, this might be, I think this is the team I was just describing. If you posted this on Twitter, like someone might be like, "Oh, CMC, that's cool." And they would just there would be no engagement for this. Maybe we should test this. Maybe I should post this and just see if it's just.
I don't want to be shamed. People are like, "Fucking Spags Draft's the worst team on beach streams all year."
The point is it's not bad. It's just not the sexiness that gets Twitter engagement here. Like no massive ADP values. We just drafted a perfectly cromulent team. You want it in your portfolio. You want to get this thing in the dance, Spags. Let me give the final rundown. You'll give your thoughts on it here. Trevor Lawrence, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield at quarterback, CMC, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, Chase Brown, Bucky Irving at running back, wide receivers, Malik Neighbors, DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, Hollywood Brown, Brian Thomas, Tyler Lockett, and Tyler Boyd. And then tight ends, Luke Musgrave, Cade Otton, and Jatavian Sanders.
And 2 Tylers to support our boy Tyler, one of our favorite people. So that's good. I think we got game stacks. The part that I like the most, I think, of what we did was we have a Niners Detroit bet, but not one that includes any of the stacks. So that could just be a game where like McCaffrey and Montgomery add enough value. They have the Breece Hall, Jerome Ford, week 17 last year, both guys get there. And then we have unique game stacks on top of it that, you know, I would say based on projection, I don't assume Jacksonville, Tennessee or Seattle, Chicago or Tampa Bay, Carolina are going to outscore Niners, Detroit. But I think that's what the tournament part of it is. Like, I think that's why Fareed's team worked, is you had the game stacks on top of kind of the core assumptions. So I'm hoping that's where we'll have some success here.
Yeah. This had a nice mix of players that are some of my favorites, like Chase Brown, Bucky, Neighbors, Keenan, some of my most drafted guys, and then mixing them around some stuff that I don't normally do, the 3 late tight ends, but we get those 3 stacks set up, which I really like a lot there. Spags, let the people know what's coming up on Splash Play. Let the people know about Probably as well.
Yeah, so for Splash Play, I do streams Monday to Saturday at 11 a.m. every day. So if you want to get drafts in, I say it to be like, it's like, Pete, you're like the circus coming into town where you have like the show, you got Shawn Siegele, the coolest clown in town. You got, and it's not disparaging in any way. It sounds disparaging the way I'm leading into it. You got Kerrane, who's like got fire and swords and stuff. And I'm just like a shitty little carnival that's here 6 days a week where like you come in, I'm probably ripping you off. The hoop doesn't go over the goldfish tank. Like there's some things that are going on.
You're selling yourself by saying I'm probably ripping you off. No, say you're the trapeze artist, Spags, you know, jumping from.
I'm just a busker on the streets. I'm a monkey with an organ grinder doing this every day. But that's what it is. Like I love your streams. I watch your streams every Monday. But I think the rest of the week, if you just want somebody who's going to do a draft and give you the best takes I can and talk about the news and all of that, that's what I tried to be. I think in hindsight, and this is more of we got a few minutes, right, Pete? I feel like Spike Week was the smarter move where like, buying 4 and Coakley, like I feel like they just kind of stopped doing drafts. I went the other way and I said, I'm going to give people more drafts than they could ever possibly want to watch. So that's the goal with Splash Play. And for Probably sports betting data, top of market sports betting data, it's been doing well. We have a product that's had a lot of success in terms of both the content I do daily. Basically, we do is track top sportsbooks around the world and then use their data to find the best bets at legal U.S. sportsbooks. So you can learn more about that. Go to probly.com, probably.com. We've got free trials on there as well if anybody wants to give a 7-day free trial. And some guys in the community have had success, like Purple Yoshi's one. Our guy Jason, OG Mans fan, is one of the first people who signed up, and he's had a lot of success over the course of months. So people out there have done well with it. It's just, I don't know if you've noticed this. The crossover, we've actually talked about it before. Crossover between best ball and betting, not quite as strong as I would have thought.
Yeah. No, if people are, Spags and I did a Best Ball After Dark show a month or so ago. You can find that if you guys are YouTube members. But yeah, all kinds of good stuff over in Spags' neck of the woods. This will be a normal week for me. I'm still lining up some guests for other shows, but we'll have all of the usual programming. Like I mentioned at the top, all kinds of new stuff over at FantasyLife, new website, new newsletter design, new premium package. So make sure you guys check that out and enjoy all the new offerings over there. And then my only other kind of one-off stuff, I'm jumping on Ron Stewart's YouTube channel tonight to draft a team with him. And then he's going to record something with me for the Deposit Kingdom channel as well. So you can keep an eye out for that. Yeah. And my main plugs, check out FantasyLife and get subscribed to the Deposit Kingdom YouTube channel for those weekly videos. I appreciate everyone hanging out in the chat. Thank you to Spags, to Shawn, to Pat, to all the fire breathers in the chat. See, you guys are
Great
mouth
elephants,
breathers.
great clowns. They're all doing a
Yes.
great job together. The show comes. The lion never kills anybody, whereas my carnival, that lion's running loose. So we're just gonna see what happens.
I kind of want to just do a whole entire brand redo and get rid of the coffee theme and just go for the circus thing. I was at the bookstore the other day with April looking at books, and they had the carnival montage for Where's Waldo, and I could imagine that as like my backdrop there, but like a best ball Where's Waldo.
I think there's still room in the schedule, Pete. If you want to, I saw you're not doing serious every day. Maybe you could fill in with some best ball circus rolling into town.
Oh man, I love Spags. Always willing to get inside baseball here with some comments at the end. You had to sneak those in. I appreciate it. Yes, no serious. No, that is a legit announcement. I'm not doing serious.
Oh, I actually didn't know. I just thought you weren't doing it for this part of the year. I didn't know that.
No, it's not. No, it's all. I haven't got a chance to mention it, but people have seen Adam Ronis is going to be doing it with Kendall. I'm going to be doing more writing. That was my choice this year, doing more of the newsletter, some more writing. So I'm excited about that. Over
Good for your
at Fantasy
schedule
Life.
too, I presume.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. We're living that dad life. All right, guys. We will see you next time on Best Ball Breakfast. We're here every Monday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Otherwise, we'll catch you around. Peace out.